Supremacy Games. Chapter 1251–1275. 1 hour later. Felix could be seen in his office with a faint smile that would make anyone believe that he was in a good mood. Meanwhile, Asna was still sitting on the couch and watching the same movie. The only difference was that she had changed her pajama and had somewhat of a natural glow. They might not have gotten all the way, but both parties were left more than satisfied with each other's comfort. "Queen, I would like to challenge the 10th Supreme, Queen Alfreda Olafil," Felix requested. "Are you sure? Have you read all the rules about the challenge?" Queen Ai asked for confirmation. "Yes." Felix gave his confirmation as he had already read everything there was to know about the 10 Supremes' battles. Firstly, he had only one chance to challenge the 10th Supreme, and if he was defeated, he would be forced to wait an entire decade for another opportunity. This was considered as a death sentence for the 11th rank, since he would neither be able to play games with other Empyrean players nor challenge the 10 Supremes. A decade was more than enough for the 12th-ranked player to replace him, though, this was considered an issue only for the other players and not Felix. Secondly, the challenge was a 1 vs 1 in a random arena setting without many strict rules like the ones in the games. It was done like this to give the players complete freedom in their battle to resemble a fight in the real world, to make it as fair as possible. In a sense, it would be more or less the same as his fight with Duchess Alina, though, surrender and revival coupons were allowed. Thirdly, if Felix won the battle, he would be safe from being challenged for an entire decade. After that, his 10th Supreme title would be open for the market. There were many other minor rules and terms, but those were the big ones. After receiving his confirmation, Queen Ai forwarded his challenge to the SG committee, as they would be the ones handling it. Felix went to restart his daily training, knowing that the battle would start in a week at minimum after Queen Alfreda accepted it. 1 week later. Is everyone as excited as I am? This is a big day for everyone in the Alliance, as we will finally see some changes happening at the top 10 list. A stunning male influencer expressed with a passionate tone as watched an ongoing stream of a packed to the brim stadium. He was streaming the stream to his followers. Usually, he merely had a couple of million live viewers, but today, he shattered the viewership ceiling by having more than 100 million viewers watching him react to the upcoming battle. This random influencer wasn't the only one taking advantage of the publicity to advertise his name, as almost all streamers were doing the same. They knew that whatever genre they used to focus on wouldn't matter to even their most hardcore fans on this very special day. I honestly didn't expect Queen Alfreda to accept the challenge, don't even mention trying to get it done as fast as possible. It's normal, she has surrender coupons and probably even a revival coupon. It's better to lose her life here and revive than be labeled as a coward. I guess everyone is under the assumption that Landlord has this in the bag? You guys have no idea how frightening my queen is. This sort of conversation was occurring across most of the chat streams, as everyone was extremely confident that Felix was going to dominate this battle. After everything he had shown them, it would be stupid to bet on Queen Alfreda. Even the gambling dens were heavily favoring Felix's victory, which caused his fans to feel upset that he wasn't receiving the underdog treatment anymore. The initial instance of this chapter being available happened at N0v3L.bjn. God knows how many wealthy people Felix had made through gambling on him. Still, the elves seemed to have some sort of unconditional confidence that their queen wouldn't get as destroyed as everyone was portraying it. Suddenly, the conversation came to an abrupt half after a savvy tall and a thin man appeared in the middle of the arena while holding a small microphone. His tailored suit hugged his lean frame perfectly, and his polished leather shoes clicked against the white-tilled floor. But it was his mustache that was impossible to miss. It was twisted and curled in a way that seemed almost unnatural, yet somehow it suited him. His dark hair was neatly combed back, and a small smile played at the corners of his mouth. He exuded a certain confidence and charm that made him resemble an aristocratic French noble. If it wasn't for his slightly green skin and drooped ears, anyone would mistake him for one. Good morning everyone. I am your host, Sir Victoire of Hellebore Flower Clan. He introduced himself while bowing before everyone. Clap clap clap. With his entry and unique appearance, he received some polite claps here and there. I am appointed as judge and MC for all battles related to the 10 Supremes titles. So, I am a bit grateful for landlord as I have been unemployed for the past decade. He cracked a joke with a faint crackle, making the audience like him a bit more. Without any more suspension, how about we give a round of applause to our brave and honorable leaders? The moment he said so, Felix and Queen Alfreda were teleported into the middle of the empty white-tilled arena. Hoo! Landlord! 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 My queen! The crowd went absolutely nuts after their eyes landed on those two breathtaking and authoritative figures, who seemed to be emitting a dignified aura that made even the viewers from different races feel the urge to show the utmost respect. P Alpha D Alpha Nu, your fans are really something. Queen Alfreda commentated as Felix's name kept booming in her ears non-stop. If it was another player, this kind of imposing pressure might mess up with their psyche before the fight, but not Queen Alfreda. They aren't so bad. Felix smiled as he lifted his hand and turned it into a fist. Just like an orchestra's conductor controlling his musicians, the fans went from wild to mute almost instantly. This caused Queen Alfreda to raise an eyebrow in surprise as she didn't expect Felix to have such a massive influence on his fanbase. Not everyone listened to Felix's shushing request, but more than 90% did. This was enough to make her understand that his fans were close to the level of worship. I believe that both parties know the rules fully well, so I won't be wasting everyone's time by repeating them. Sir Victoire said as he clapped his hands twice, causing both Felix and Queen Alfreda to get teleported to extreme sides of the arena. The battleground chosen was a clean normal flat-surfaced gladiator arena. Though, it wasn't small in the slightest as it stretched for hundreds of kilometers, giving both players the freedom to go all out. The battle will commence in 30 seconds. Sir Victoire announced as he teleported to his platform, leaving the arena to those two monsters. I hope he won't embarrass her too much. Emperor Local said what was on most of his peers' minds. Elder Dragon, High Chieftain Lakaka, and the rest of the 10 rulers had all attended the stadium and were spectating from the highest point in the sky above everyone else. If she didn't want to get embarrassed, she should have declined the challenge. Elder Dragon sneered, making this take longer than it should. The others ignored his remark as he was clearly irritated that his fight with Felix was getting delayed because of her. 3, 2, 1. Fight! Soon, everyone ignored him and refocused on the battle after Sir Victoire gave both parties the freedom to move. Let's give them a beautiful show, shall we? Felix smiled as he eyed Queen Alfreda from a distance. Queen Alfreda was the first to make her move as she pointed a wooden thin wand at herself and created a defensive repelling gravity field to protect her from any projectiles fired at her. Then, she pointed her wand into the sky and said calmly, Omnipotent light spell, Star of Salvation. A massive white runic hex manifested tens of kilometers above her head before a gigantic blinding spherical star emerged from it slowly. In a few seconds at best, a new sun was introduced into the arena, forcing most of the viewers to squint their eyes as they looked at it. Star of Salvation. If it wasn't for Queen AI dialing down the light intensity for us, everyone would have been blinded by now. Sir Victoire commentated as he watched the spinning star. While most viewers assumed that Queen Alfreda created this star to use it as a way to crowd control Felix, making it difficult for him to fight her under its burning and blinding intensity, in reality, she was starting her preparation. Omnipotent water spell, cleansing shower. With another small wave of her wand, rain clouds began manifesting under a giant blue runic hex in the sky before heavy raindrops showered many kilometers of radius around her. With the Star of Salvation still illuminating as brightly, a breathtaking curved rainbow manifested in the sky for the enjoyment of the viewers. But no one spent even a second of attention on it as Queen Alfreda waved her wand yet again, creating a vast green hex to appear on the ground this time. Omnipotent nature spell, living botany kingdom. She murmured the moment the green hex finished completion. Under the stunned and somewhat mesmerized eyes of the viewers, a chaotic world of lush greenery and untamed wilderness had risen from the ground and turned the boring arena into a fairyland. Towering trees loomed overhead, their branches and leaves forming a dense canopy that blocked out much of the sunlight, but not the Star of Salvation's light. The air was thick with humidity, and the scent of damp earth and decaying plant matter hung heavily in the air. The ground was covered in a thick layer of underbrush, dotted with ferns and vines that clung to the trunks and branches of the trees. With the never-ending rain, the entire atmosphere made the jungle seem peaceful and welcoming. Felix wasn't fooled by the jungle's serenity at all. Unlike most viewers, Felix had done his research on Queen Alfreda's previous battles, making him understand fully well what this entire setup implied. Water, light, nature, and accelerated growth spell. Felix smiled. She went all out from the start. Thud. 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 Abruptly, thundering noise began escaping from the massive jungle as trees kept shaking and the ground tremoring. Before the viewers could react, an army of humongous humanoids walking trees emerged from the depth of the jungle into the open. The creatures stood at least 50 meters tall, their bark-like skin rough and knotted like old leather. Their limbs were thick and gnarled, their fingers ending in sharp, woody points. Their eyes were large and green, set deep in their wooden face. Their faces had all sorts of unique expressions, like they were trying their best to copy living emotions but failing at it horribly. This army of trees wasn't alone, as it was accompanied by a much larger army of flora, living plants and even fungus. Their bodies were made up of bark, leaves, flowers, and mushrooms. Some of them were bright in color while some seemed dim. These plant people were a marvel to behold, with delicate flowers sprouting from their heads and bright, colorful fruits hanging from their arms. Queen Alfreda arose from the jungle and into the air. With this living army of all unique families of plants under her, she resembled the goddess of nature. She broke the silence with a single order: charge! Thud! 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 Thousands of humanoid and beastified plants rushed in direction of Felix at the top of their speed with emotionless eyes. They might seem alive, but clearly, they were more like plant golems than actual living plants with souls. Queen Alfreda has used 3 of her elements to create this magnificent omnipotent spell technique. As long as the Salvation Star is up and the rain keeps pouring, the jungle will keep giving birth to living plants for eternity. Sir Victoire commentated passionately as he watched the jungle that was continuously growing and expanding its territory on the arena. Queen Alfreda might not have a monstrous talent like selfie or a runic familiarity with a complex element like time, but she was still a force to be feared. She had an extremely high runic familiarity with water, light, nature, and gravity. With her living for more than 100,000 years, she had already mastered everything there was to master about her runic spells. She even began creating new runic techniques that require a perfect combination of 2 abilities or more from different elements. This living kingdom was her signature masterpiece, as it utilized artificial photosynthesis created from light and water to accelerate their growth. This looks cool and all, but King Maxwell can avoid her army by using his teleportation spell. King Tresnor commented as he watched the game with some of his friends in the inner circle. Well, she already knows that she can't compete against him, so she is trying to at least demonstrate that she isn't a weakling. It's smart. Fisherman Queen Everly said. The others nodded in agreement, knowing that this battle's results were already predetermined. Please visit. What is he doing? The inaugural upload of this chapter took place via N0v3L.B, J, N. The fairy's matriarch tilted her head in confusion after noticing a massive golden hex manifest underneath Felix. This caught everyone's attention as they assumed that he would be using spatial spells instead of sand ones. Abruptly, massive quantities of sand began filling up tens of kilometers around Felix. In less than a few seconds, a vast overbearing desert with golden dunes and windy sandstorms was manifested out of nowhere, akin to magic. Omnipotent sand spell, Golden Pharaoh's Empire. Felix uttered under his breath as he gently lifted 2 fingers. Before the viewers could react to the desert creations, solid sand pyramids rose from the desert like towering giants, their peaks reaching toward the cloudless sky. Each pyramid was a marvel of geometry, with smooth sides and sharp angles that seemed to defy the shifting sands below. The sun beat down mercilessly, casting harsh shadows across the dunes and making the pyramids shimmer with an otherworldly glow. The 3 pyramids weren't there for decoration purposes as humongous sand guardians began to emerge from their surfaces. The guardians had animalistic heads, and humanoid bodies, and were carrying different types of weapons. The moment they were born, thousands of sand soldiers were created around the pyramids, seemingly awakening to give those guardians their respected authority. Is Landlord aiming to launch a war against Queen Alfreda's plant armies? Sir Victoire exclaimed with a startled tone. His reaction was shared by the rest of the stupefied viewers. They weren't as shocked about the Sand Empire as Felix's decision to not take the fast road. In their eyes, he could easily ignore Queen Alfreda's armies and force her to fight him hand to hand. Sure, she had gravity in her favor, but it shouldn't cause Felix too much of an issue. They were right in this sense, but, unbeknownst to them, Felix wanted to give Queen Alfreda a rightful stage for her dethronement. I finally see why Selphie is obsessed with him. Queen Alfreda figured out Felix's motives immediately and couldn't help but feel appreciative of the gesture. Now that her heart was filled with unconditional hatred toward Felix, she wasn't able to turn a blind eye to those good gestures anymore. Charge! With a similar command from Felix, the pyramid's guardians, and their soldiers rushed in perfect formations in direction of the plant armies. The scene on the battlefield was truly a sight to behold. An army of sand soldiers rushed from one side, their weapons gleaming in the sandstorm and their bodies glittering in the sunlight. Meanwhile, the army of plant troops was rushing from the opposite side, with their bodies made of vines, leaves, and flowers and their weapons being sharpened branches and vine thorns. The earth trembled beneath the weight of their footfall as the 2 sides engaged in a violent conflict. Boom! Boom! Clunk! The sand soldiers assaulted their plant counterparts with fluid grace, their bodies changing and swirling like a sandstorm. The plant troops, though, were no less dangerous, their thorned weapons easily pierced through the sand, and their bodies twisted and turned to deflect strikes. Since both parties were soulless, there were no cries of pain as the sounds of wood and hardened sand weapons clashing filled the air. The sand guardians locked in with the titan humanoid trees amidst the battlefield, causing the most casualties with their humongous overbearing bodies. Still, the sand soldiers weren't affected by this as their broken bodies reconstruct to peak form after turning into piles of sand, unlike the plant's troops. This made them fight with a ferocious determination, combining and moving their bodies to form new formations. The plant troops, on the other hand, exploited their inherent skills to trap and ensnare their adversaries, turning the sand beneath their feet against them. Since there were plants capable of healing, the fallen plant troops were left under their care. This created a never-ending conflict between 2 sides that knew no rest, no death, and no defeat. The viewers were left with a sense of awe and beauty despite the turmoil and devastation. It had gotten to the point, no one was cheering for either Felix or Queen Alfreda, but those lifeless but courageous soldiers. Queen Alfreda knew that Felix wasn't going to wait patiently until the war was decided by those soldiers. She decided to take it upon herself to make him understand that she was ready to step down as the 10th Supreme. So, she used her final and strongest spell in her arsenal. Omnipotent Nature Spell, Thousand-Armed Wooden Celestial. Queen Alfreda uttered as she pointed her wand at the massive jungle beneath her. Suddenly, a towering wooden celestial, tens of kilometers tall, with thousands of arms stretching out in all directions rose from the center jungle. The celestial's face was serene and peaceful and its body was carved with intricate patterns and designs that seemed to glow under the star of salvation. The celestial's presence was awe-inspiring, radiating a sense of ancient wisdom and spiritual power. This left most of the viewers with mouth agape, not daring to believe that runic nature spells were capable of such creation. Ka-thum! Ka-thum! Without needing Queen Alfreda to say anything, the 1,000-armed wooden celestial started walking in direction of the heated war zone. With each step it took, the arena trembled, causing those soldiers to lose their balance. Still, they stood back up and continued killing each other. I guess she made up her mind. Felix smiled faintly as he cracked his knuckles, preparing to end this. Without an ounce of hesitation, he teleported in front of the wooden titan the moment it arrived at the battlefield. Just like it possessed some sort of radar, immediately after Felix appeared underneath it, the wooden celestial 10 arms at him. The wind hollowed as the 10 arms sliced through it with great intensity, causing anyone to tense up against them. But not Felix, he merely lifted his head and stared at the incoming wooden palms with an indifferent expression. He neither moved out of the way nor seemed like he planned to defend himself. This sight caught everyone by surprise as they knew that Felix might be extremely strong, but those palms weren't a joke in the slightest. Just as Sir Victoire was about to comment on this, the 10 wooden palms landed on Felix and the entire area around him simultaneously. Bam! The noise produced was enough to make the viewers feel a slight shiver course down their spine. Dust and smoky debris were lifted in the air, blocking everyone's sight, but the hundreds of shattered sand and plant soldiers made them understand that the situation wasn't pleasant. Did King Maxwell teleport to safety? King Tresnor frowned as he scanned the area around the dust cloud, believing that Felix must have gotten out of the way in time if he didn't defend himself. This was what almost everyone believed. This belief made their reaction more extreme after the dust cloud cleared out and Felix's shadowy figure reappeared without a single scratch on him. Impossible! Hey! Did he block them with his body alone? Princess Merlira's 4 eyes widened in shock after noticing that Felix was surrounded by shattered gigantic wooden hands. The rest of the inner circle leaders and viewers shared the same reaction as her. Ka-thum! The wooden celestial didn't seem to understand what happened as it ignored its shattered wooden arms and continued its assault on Felix. Bam! 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 The ground kept shaking with each strike, causing the entire battlefield to be thrown into an utter mess. No one seemed to care anyone about those soldiers as everyone's eyes were affixed wholly on Felix's area. When the wooden celestial stopped and the dust cloud went away, most of the spectators couldn't help but take in a deep cold breath in stupefaction at Felix's unharmed body. The only change that happened was that more shattered wooden arms were around him and that the cracks on his body were illuminating like he was a bomb on the verge of explosion. What the hell did he do to make his body this hard? The inner circle leaders and the majority of the viewers had absolutely no idea about Felix's destruction bloodline, making them incapable of figuring out the truth. As for the 10 rulers, Elder Dragon and High Chieftain Lakaka were seen knitting their eyebrows deeply at the awe-inspiring scene of Felix walking towards the Celestial while facing one assault after another without a change of expression. Destruction immunity, how troublesome! Elder Dragon thought to himself. He already knew that this passive was going to be an insane pain in the ass when he fight Felix, but knowing was one thing and seeing it in action was another. Please visit. Still, this hadn't shaken his confidence and pride even a little, it was for a good reason. His body might not be destroyed by such force, but he must be feeling pain like normal. Elder Dragon narrowed his eyes coldly, if so, I will make him beg for me to kill him. He clearly planned on harming Felix non-stop until his mental fortitude gave in to the pain before his body. It was a great plan. Alas, the next sight was going to make him understand that he didn't even have such luxury. Why is Landlord's body illuminating brightly? Sir Victoire wondered out loud after the Celestial had finally stopped assaulting Felix. It wasn't because Queen Alfreda ordered him, but he had no more arms to be used. He literally turned itself into a handicapped wooden statue even though it had thousands of arms. Yet, no one was focusing on it as their eyes were pointed at Felix's peculiar bright body. The inaugural upload of this chapter took place via N0v3L.B, J, N. Unbeknownst to the confusion his mutation had created, Felix merely tightened his right hand into a fist and murmured, "This should be enough." He lifted his head back up and eyed the center of the Celestial's wooden chest. Then, he blinked right in front of it without hesitation. The moment the camera managed to trace Felix's movement and placed him on the big screen, his fluorescent blinding fist made contact with the Celestial's chest. With the Celestial's size reaching up to tens of kilometers, Felix resembled a tiny ant using its weak little arm to poke a whale. Everyone's rational thinking process made them assured that nothing drastic should happen, but the next scene absolutely shattered their rationality. The brilliant punch landed on the wooden surface with a loud thud. The impact sent a shockwave through Felix's arm, jarring his bones and rattling his teeth. He could feel the sting of the blow reverberating through his entire body, a testament to the force with which he had struck the wood. Yet, whatever he felt was nowhere near what happened to the Celestial's chest. Under the dumbfounded and shocked eyes of the viewers, a giant perfectly circular hole emerged from both sides of the Celestial's torso, making it resemble a tunnel created out of machinery instead of a mere human's punch. Boom! This wasn't even close to the end, as the force of the punch was barely weakened by Celestial's body. The impact of the blow was so catastrophic, it sent shockwaves rippling through the battlefield, turning anything that was physical into dust particles. It still continued on its journey at the speed of sound until it reached Queen Alfreda and her precious jungle. Her stunned expression was changed for the worst, as the massive shockwave was so great it created a vacuum, sucking in the surrounding air and leaving a massive crater in place of the jungle. As the dust settled, everyone's expressions were as pale as paper and their eyes seemed to reflect an untold level of deep terror. Whether it was the quick-witted MC, the 10 rulers, the inner circle leaders, or the rest of the viewers, words seemed to turn into the air the moment they opened their mouths. What? Impossible! How can this be real? As their aghast eyes scanned the ruined battlefield and the jungle, most of them realized that they had just witnessed possibly the strongest punch ever recorded in the Alliance. Queen AI confirmed it immediately by releasing a notification on the big screen that said, "A new punch record has been set, 984,487 BF. Elder Dragon, High Chieftain Lakaka, and everyone in the top 10 Supremes had their expressions turn for the worst the moment they read that monstrous number. Even Elder Dragon's carefree attitude was nowhere to be seen anymore, as the strength of this punch was even greater than what he could offer. This is getting dangerous," he thought with a deep frown. He was finally awakened to the truth, that Felix wasn't just going to be a troublesome opponent, but potentially a life-ending one. Boom! Abruptly, everyone was awakened from their daze after the Celestial's body ended up blowing up into fragments. The punch's force was concentrated enough to penetrate through its torso, but its shockwave had still traveled across its entire body, leaving it filled with unrestorable cracks. Only now did it give in and fall to the ground, creating a mountain of shattered wood in the center of the silent battlefield. Whoa! Just like their brains were switched on, the crowd erupted into cheers, their unified voices ringing through the air like a chorus of maddened angels. Even the elves seemed to have been carried by the heated atmosphere as they cheered with Felix's fans as well, not realizing that this ending was going to affect their lives negatively. Who could blame them for such reaction? They had just witnessed for the first time in their lives, a physical punch that almost crossed 1 million BF. A number that was believed by the public to be unreachable by anyone, as even Elder Dragon's strongest demonstrated force was limited at 700 kbf. Obviously, this was recorded at the earliest days of the Alliance, and Elder Dragon should have surpassed it by now, but still. Almost 1 million BF, I am honestly speechless. Sir Victoire commentated while staring with unblinking eyes at Felix, who teleported above the mountain of wood while dusting his hands in a carefree manner. Is he even a human anymore? Forget that, is he even a mortal anyone? Queen Allura expressed with an astounded expression. She might be Felix's senior sister, but she was just as ignorant about Felix's strength as the others. This made her find it extremely difficult to believe that this was the same junior brother who knew almost absolutely nothing about laws just a decade ago. That kind of force wasn't natural. Empress Emily analyzed emotionlessly. Each time he got hit by the wooden celestial, his body has gotten hotter, which translates to accepting a high level of untapped chaotic force. He released it all during his punch. No wonder his body kept turning brighter. Minister Aquarius said. With his destruction immunity, doesn't this means that he can absorb any upcoming force without limit and release it at once? Emperor Local raised an eyebrow in surprise as he instinctively glanced at Elder Dragon. Everyone did the same after understanding the significant and horrifying implications of this kind of ability. This will make it slightly more interesting than it is, nothing more, nothing less. Elder Dragon disclosed indifferently at their weird looks. If it was someone else saying this, they would believe that he was just full of sh*t and didn't want to make himself weak before them. But when it came from Elder Dragon, all of them were left to believe that maybe he had something in his sleeves to handle it. Congratulations to Landlord for becoming the 10th Supreme. A well-deserved title for one of the greatest players to grace the platform. Abruptly, their conversation was forced to a halt after Sir Victoire voiced this announcement passionately in the stadium. When they focused back on the arena, they found out that Queen Alfreda had already surrendered without wasting a single second. The inaugural upload of this chapter took place via N0v3L.B, J, N. After what she had witnessed, she knew that no one was going to use her surrender as a way to humiliate her and her people. Thanks for going easy on me. Queen Alfreda nodded in appreciation at Felix. It's nothing. Felix smiled back. Soon, their conversation was interrupted by Sir Victoire as he appeared next to Felix and interviewed him. Is it possible to know if you will take a pause or continue your challenges? I challenge Kirsoon, the White Dragon clan head. Felix answered bluntly with another challenge. Then, he teleported outside of the stadium, leaving everyone somewhat speechless. They knew that Felix planned on ending all of his challenges in less than a year, but they didn't expect that he wouldn't stop for even a day in between. Please visit. After Felix returned to his house, he gave Asna a peck on the lips and sat next to her on the couch without bothering to take even a shower. The fight was so easy, it took almost no effort out of him. Do you think it was smart to show Elder Dragon your force absorption passive? You could have ended the fight with other methods. Asna wondered lazily as she glanced at him. I know, but I wanted to show it to everyone in hopes of them declining the challenge and saving me the trouble. As for Elder Dragon, Felix snickered as he opened a cold alcoholic beverage. I want true despair to start building in his heart as he scrambles to find ways to deal with me. It's been a long while since his pride was touched, and I think it's more fun to crack it slowly before shattering it at once. While the other challenges were just for business, Elder Dragon's battle was as personal as it could be. Felix was going to make sure that he received the best kind love out of him. Ring ring. Felix's AP bracelet started ringing suddenly, making him glance at the screen. When he saw the caller's name, he murmured, I knew it will be him. He picked up the call and answered with a polite tone, How are you doing, Elder Kirsoon? Haha, I was fine a few minutes ago. Clan head Kirsoon chuckled. My apologies for the public challenge, I just wanted a reason to dip away. Felix coughed. Felix might have bad blood with Elder Dragon and even dislike most of the dragons due to their overbearing pride, but he still acted respectfully toward clan head Kirsoon. After all, he was nothing but good to him during his stay in Icarus Galaxy, and if it wasn't for his support, he might not have reached this far. Don't mind it, private or public, I don't care. Clan head Kirsoon smiled, I called you to congratulate you on your victory as well as let you know that I will be forfeiting the challenge. Are you sure? Felix fixed his posture and said with a solemn tone, I don't have an issue with my making our battle a bit balanced. Felix had absolutely no plans of ever doing this to the other challengers, but clan head Kirsoon deserved some love after he took care of him in his palace. I appreciate it, but I would rather be embarrassed through a forfeit over faking a battle to keep my pride unwounded. Clan head Kirsoon shook his head, if I accepted the challenge, I will go all out even if it means dropping dead in the process. I see. Somehow, Felix felt that clan head Kirsoon's answer would be like this. Dragons' innate pride was so overbearing, they would never try to protect it through dishonorable actions. Queen Alfreda was different, as the only thing she cared about was her race's honor, and she would do anything to keep it from being touched. Anyhow, keep up the hard work, and I can't wait to watch your battle with Elder Dragon. Clan head Kirsoon smiled, we are all rooting for you. Hey? Why? Shouldn't you root for Elder Dragon? Felix was taken aback. If you know what we knew, you would understand. Clan head Kirsoon showed a faint bitter smile before he said his goodbyes and hang up the call. After the call was disconnected, Felix was left looking at Asna with a weirded out look. Maybe they want you to win since they aren't too pleased with their people's royal gemstones being devoured by him in the past years. Asna guessed, he is quite the big bully and I don't think any one of them can stand up to him. Maybe, but this fight isn't going to change anything about that. Felix said, in their eyes, even if I killed him, he will be revived and still keep his position as the dragon's leader. They probably found out that you can destroy souls and are rooting for you to kill him for real. Possibly. Felix rested his chin on his arm thoughtfully. Here I thought that I will be starting a war with the dragon race if I killed their leader for real. I guess it's more complicated than that. A few moments later, Felix's thought process was broken by Queen Ai informing him about clan head Kirsoon's declining his challenge. This made him straight away jump to the 9th rank. Without delay, Felix challenged the 8th Supreme, Nobili. Spaceworm Shaman Nobili, the wife of High Chieftain La Kaka. If she doesn't forfeit, this is going to be one of the most annoying fights ever. Felix knitted his eyebrows in irritation, knowing that high-leveled spaceworms were the worst to fight. His spatial runic spells were considered a mere joke before those monsters who spend their entire lives using space manipulation for a living. After the challenge was released, the SG committee delivered it to Nobili, Spaceworm Shaman. High Chieftain La Kaka was informed by his wife about it, making him drop his duties and return home to discuss this grave situation. As the second supreme and leader of one of the richest races in the universe, one would assume that his house should be a palace that was stretching for thousands of kilometers. But in reality, he was living a simple life inside a simpler tribal house that was exuding warmth and a sense of community. The floor was covered in vibrantly colored woven mats, and the walls were constructed from woven reeds. Candle light and the rare beam of sunshine that entered through the thatched ceiling provided a soothing illumination for the space. A sizable fire pit with dancing flames that threw flickering shadows on the walls was in the room's center. The aroma of burning wood and embers crackling filled the air. You can't accept the challenge. High Chieftain La Kaka said with a solemn tone as he eyed his wife, who was sitting on the opposite side. Just like him, Nobili had a huge body that was at least 5 meters long and was coated in shimmering scales that sparkled under the dim light of the fireplace. She had antennas that shone like jewels and had an otherworldly intensity to them. The only difference between them was their width, as Nobili was much thinner. I know that he is powerful, but I am not a weakling either. Nobili replied calmly, I have analyzed what he had shown and nothing is of a certain threat to me if I made sure to fight from a different dimension. In her eyes, everything that Felix had demonstrated was threatening to others but not her. As a master of space manipulation, she had many methods to fight Felix from safety and his life hell. He also has spatial runic spells. High Chieftain La Kaka warned, for all we know, he can be hiding other spatial spells and use one to sneak up on you. Regardless of what runic spells he learned, he can't use them without me being alerted. Nobili shook her head, you already know that. So, what's all this about? Don't you trust my capabilities? High Chieftain La Kaka went silent as he knew that she was on to him. As one of the greatest spatial elementalists in the universe, both of them possessed extreme spatial sensitivity that enabled them to sense the slightest spatial disorientations from thousands of kilometers. Sigh, I know that all signs lead to you having the upper hand against him, but I still have a very bad feeling about this. That bastard always has something under his sleeves and I am certain that he prepared a way to deal with you. Plus, I believe the best option is to avoid him and challenge Beamit after he loses his revival coupon. If those dragon clan heads all challenged him, you might even use this opportunity to your advantage and climb much higher. In a sense, High Chieftain Lakaka's strategy was quite shrewd, as he knew that the other dragon clan heads would try to fight for their position, unlike Kirsoon. After seeing Felix's strength, he was certain that he was going to make them regret this choice. The inaugural upload of this chapter took place via N0v3L.B, J, N. This would give his wife the best chance to climb much higher now that the ranks were thrown into disarray and everyone would want to make the best of it. Even though the benefits of each rank were similar, those authoritative figures still found a lot of value in being ranked higher than their peers. It seemed like his wife was affected by his logical analysis, as she didn't reject it right away. If I accepted the challenge, losing it means possibly risking my revival coupon. If I win it, I won't gain anything while the others will gain everything. Nobly pondered. She knew that Felix was aiming at Elder Dragon, which meant that he wasn't going to stop until he reached him. If she defeated him, he wouldn't be able to challenge her for another decade, which would leave the others at peace, knowing that he would always come after her first. In other words, unless she killed him twice in the battles, he would keep coming at her non-stop. You're right, it's not worth it. Nobly nodded at her husband. You made the right call. High Chieftain Lakaka sighed in relief. While his wife was pretty confident in dealing with Felix, he honestly had not an ounce of trust that she would defeat him. Shadowborn ruler Hogan had told almost everyone about Felix's ability to target the soul straightway, which made him even more afraid that Felix would kill his wife for real as a way to get in his head. After all, ever since their first meeting, he never left a good impression on Felix. Unbeknownst to him, Felix had no such plans at all, and he was merely projecting his own evil thoughts onto him. Though Felix wasn't complaining, as the moment Queen Ai notified him that Nobly had also fortified, he was put on cloud 9. This is really surprising, I thought she will give it a go. Candace said in intrigue. I am just as baffled. Felix shrugged his shoulders, but who cares? She did me a huge favor. Felix knew that handling Nobly was going to be a pain in the ass, since most of his abilities could be countered with spatial abilities. So, he planned on taking her down by using his concept destruction spear when she least expected it. But now, he could save it for her husband, who he knew was never going to forfeit before him. Maybe the streak will continue and the Red Clan head will forfeit too. Felix said with a wishful tone as he released his challenge. Alas, after a couple of hours, Queen Ai notified him that the challenge was accepted and the battle would occur 7 days from today. I guess I was asking for too much. Felix chuckled. Though he might not be too pleased with the battle, he wasn't that annoyed. That's because he knew that the Red Clan head Bimud was going to change his mind real quick in the middle of the game. 7 days later. In a silent stadium that was packed to the brim with spectators, Elder Dragon and the rest of the dragons had somewhat ugly expressions as they looked at the battlefield before them. The once powerful mountain range was in ruins, with its peaks broken and its valleys filled with debris. The ruins of what had once been a healthy ecology had been reduced to a lifeless wasteland, and the air was thick with dust and ash. The few trees that were still standing were wilted and burned, with branches that extended upward like skeleton hands. Only the occasional gust of wind that sent clouds of dust flying through the air could be heard to break the deafening silence. Amidst this apocalyptic scene, Felix could be seen sitting with a nonchalant expression above the corpse of a gigantic red-scaled dragon. This was Bimud, or at least, what was left of him. Bimud lay motionless on the ground, his once glistening scales now dulled and stained with blood. His eyes, once fierce and glowing with an inner fire, were now dark and lifeless. His wings, which had once spanned the length of a castle, were now torn and tattered, their once majestic beauty marred by battle. Bimud's mouth was still open, revealing rows of broken teeth stained with his own blood. His entire corpse showed an unspeakable level of destruction that shouldn't have been associated with a dragon clan head. Yet, here he was, lying lifelessly in his own pool of blood under the stunned and somewhat terrified eyes of the viewers. Land, gulp, congratulations to landlord for winning the fight. Sir Victoire commentated with great difficulty as the image of the barbaric massacre refused to escape his mind. Everyone here knew that Felix had the highest chance of victory, but none of them were ready for how Felix was going to attain it. Boom! 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 An automatic replay suddenly played on the big screen, causing everyone to flinch as they moved their eyes slowly toward it. When they saw it again, the level of shock hadn't been reduced even a bit. Who could blame them? The replay was showing Felix tanking everything thrown at him from fire beams, fireballs, nukes, dragon breaths, and even tanking all of the physical confrontations. It was like watching an indestructible and unburnable deity toying with one of the strongest figures in the alliance. What's worse? He was using the absorbed force from everything thrown at him to completely rip apart Bimid with his bare hands. He neither used a weapon, a scroll, a potion, or elemental abilities, or even his runic spells. He just relied on his bare fists, nothing more, nothing less. Yet, they were more than enough to butcher Red Clan head Bimid in less than 20 seconds. This wasn't a fight. Emperor Local uttered with a tint of terror, this was a direct warning for his next opponents. It seemed like it worked as the remaining Dragon Clan heads, Igos and Azastirth, felt their scales tighten for the first time in a very, very long time. Dragon's scales tightening was the same as goosebumps running on the skin. In other words, they were scared of Felix like prey recognizing its predator. From this battle, no, from this slaughter, they recognized that Felix was their absolute predator. Are you going to accept his challenge? Igos asked with a solemn tone as he eyed Azastirth, who was sitting on the other end of a dining table. After Felix slayed Bimid, he declared his next challenge and left the stadium. Igos and Azastirth straightaway held a meeting to discuss their next move on this matter. The inaugural upload of this chapter took place via N0v3L.B.J.N. Before the fight, none of them had a single doubt about accepting the challenge, but now? Even their overbearing pride was having trouble leading them. I want nothing more but to accept it, but there is a difference between pride in one's strength and identity and blind arrogance. Azastirth shook his head, trying his best to remove the image of Bimid's body getting ripped right in front of him. I am thinking the same. That bastard is already on the level of Elder Dragon. It's best to stay out of their way. Igos nodded in agreement. They might have overbearing pride, but they weren't stupid enough to challenge someone on the level of Elder Dragon to prove themselves. If there was a tiny chance of them winning against Felix, their pride might make it difficult for them. But after seeing Bimid's ending, they were forced to accept that they had zero chance of victory even if it wounded their pride. Both of them forfeited. Neat. Felix smiled with a satisfied expression after receiving news that his challenges were declined by Azastirth and Igos. If they forfeited, that old turtle will also do the same. Asna shared. Let's hope so. Felix sent his challenge to Minister Aquarius. Just as he was to return to his training, he was left speechless after getting almost an instant reply. Minister Aquarius has declined your challenge. Congratulations. You have won the battle through forfeit. Queen AI announced. Did I scare them too much? Felix didn't know whether to laugh or cry at Minister Aquarius' speed of rejecting him. It was like he didn't even put an ounce of thought process on the challenge and hit the decline button the instant it showed up. I am not complaining, I guess. Without further ado, Felix sent another challenge to the Hive Empress's Guardian N0. He was ranked 3rd in the entire ranking and for a good reason. He was the most feared mentalist in the entire universe. Everyone was scared of him more than the Hive Empress herself since she never participated in such fights. This left him to represent her and his entire race, yet, he was ranked higher than even Dragon Clan heads and Minister Aquarius. Unlike his previous challenges, Felix was actually feeling somewhat tense about this battle. He knew that his improved mental defenses would be put to a real test against him, and if he made a mistake, his run might be ended in the short term. In a faraway galaxy, in a somewhat similar solar system to Earth, a cosmic living and seemingly breathing fleshy planet-like substance could be seen orbiting the star. It might seem like a planet, but its size was that of a star. Billions of gigantic worm-like green insects were seen entering and exiting from countless tunnels. There were a couple of spaceships here and there, but none of them dared to get too close to this flesh-like planet. This was Ophiria, the main nest of the hive race. It was a biological engineering marvel, as in order to meet the needs of the hive's residents, a sophisticated network of tunnels and chambers was used in the construction of the hive. The hive's walls were formed of a fibrous substance that was very durable and elastic, enabling it to expand and contract as necessary. Each section of the hive served a certain function and was organized into many groups. Young hive residents were reared and cared for by workers in the nursery sector. The hive's food supply, which consisted of a variety of organic substances, including most plants, was kept in the food storage area. There were more chambers and specialized areas across the entire nest of Ophiria. Not every outsider was allowed entry, but those who managed to get access. Every one of them was left in awe and amazement at the unique world inside of Ophiria. Empress Scarlet was residing at the center, which was the safest location in the entire nest. Still, there were millions of insect-like guards ranging from wasps, bees, ants, fireflies, and beetles around it. Those were still merely the foot soldiers. The real guards were situated inside Empress Chamber. They were none other than the night guards from number 1 to 500. Still, those night guards were merely allowed access to the Empress Chamber, but not actually staying next to her. The only one with such authority was the one and only, Hive Empress Guardian N0. It's best to forfeit the challenge. Empress Scarlet advised in the same manner as High Chieftain Lakaka. As you command. Though, the response was different as Guardian N0 agreed without an ounce of hesitation. You don't want to know why. This loyal subject doesn't need to know his master's thoughts to adhere to her orders. Guardian N0 replied with a flat tone that went against his beautiful appearance. Unlike most of the hive insects, he had a slender and delicate body that was covered in fine, velvety hairs. His wings were large and broad, with intricate patterns of bright colors that range from deep indigo to vibrant orange. The wings were also covered in fine scales that gave them a unique texture, almost like the petals of a flower. His head was small and rounded, with two large compound eyes that were bright green in color. I am still telling you. Empress Scarlet chuckled, already used to teasing his unquestionable loyalty. Guardian N0 seemed somewhat curious. He might listen to every command of his master even if it meant committing suicide, but he still had normal emotions like everyone else. You see, we are in a somewhat unique situation. You can't defeat Elder Dragon as his mental defenses are on your level, but at the same time, we don't know if King Maxwell's mental defenses are as good as his. Empress Scarlet explained with her usual gentle tone, what we know is that he has all the qualities to go against Elder Dragon and even defeat him. This leaves us with a perfect triangle between the three of you. I don't want this triangle to stop such a good fight from happening. Empress Scarlet chuckled, watching that arrogant dragon getting some spanking is a long wish of mine. Yes. Guardian N0 nodded in understanding. Guardian N0 might not have been alive as long as his master, but he had lived the longest compared to his brothers and sisters. This made him find out that his mother and his race had fought plenty of times with the dragons during the Dark Ages. They were considered the two most aggressive races during that era in terms of conquest, which made them clash horns on many occasions. Not to conquest each other but to fight over other prey. As much as the hive race seemed weaker than the dragon race, they had numbers and a frightening level of unity that caused their mental attacks to synchronize and get much stronger to the point they could blow even the souls of dragons. This kind of mutual respect for each other's strength made them lock horns but never go all out on each other. Now that Empress Scarlet was presented with the chance of seeing her previous rival getting the beating of his life, there was no way she was going to make her subordinate get in the way. It's done, I have declined the challenge. Guardian N0 informed. Good, now we just need to see what Lakaka will do. Empress Scarlet smiled faintly, hopefully, he doesn't get in the way. Unfortunately, High Chieftain Lakaka always had a bone to pick with Felix, and there was no way he was going to give up on this opportunity to put Felix in his place. Even he declined? What the hell is going on? Felix's reaction to Guardian N0's forfeit was more evident, as he didn't expect him to avoid him too. Maybe you scared him? Candace wondered. Scared him? Maybe, but he still won't decline the challenge, as it is his own duty to defend his race's reputation. Felix stated confidently, this must be the doing of Empress Scarlet. He was certain that Empress Scarlet must have ordered him to decline the challenge, as she was the only one with such authority over him. Why? Asna said lazily, I doubt you have charmed her too. How would I know? Felix shrugged his shoulders. Maybe she is interested in my fight with Elder Dragon and doesn't want to interrupt it. Or she is doing me a favor and wants to cash it out later. All that Felix knew was that the Hive race and dragons didn't share the best relationship before the foundation of the alliance, as history books spoke plenty about their epic clashes. Though, he wasn't sure if Empress Scarlet would really be holding a grudge for more than 2 million years now. In the end, Felix thanked her for the freebie with an appreciative email and sent another challenge to High Chieftain Lakaka. Maybe, your forfeit streak will con. Before Candace could finish her sentence, she was forced to swallow the rest of it after Queen Ai gave Felix an instant acceptance notification. Never mind, he really hates your guts. Candace giggled. He sure does. Felix smiled wryly. Felix could understand his enmity with Elder Dragon, as it had originated from his fear of having his nasty secrets going public. But High Chieftain Lakaka? He really hated him just because of the Void Nation's threat to his race's monopoly on the Alliance's transportation system. Honestly, the Void Nation was making big moves in this department, as they had been receiving a never-ending list of delivery commissions from everyone. After all, they were capable of traveling at godly speed in the Void Realm, making it possible to make hundreds of deliveries compared to just one delivery in the same time frame. Still, the wormhole network wasn't going to be affected that much, since there were barely 1,000 Void citizens taking those delivery gigs. I thought that his insecurities will go away after he realizes this. Felix shook his head. Clearly, his greed for money knows no bounds. Space worms were all greedy as hell for money, to the point they were almost matched with goblins. High Chieftain Lakaka might be a race leader and had possibly hundreds of trillions in his account. He still wanted no one to interfere with his race's monopoly, regardless of how small it was. L1 Terrari N0V3L hosted the first appearance of this chapter at N0vel.B1N. This was beyond rational and on the obsessive scale, as it was no longer about the money but the sense of losing it. This was a sickness that affected many humans too, as some couldn't stomach even losing 1 penny while they had millions in their bank accounts. Whatever his issue with me, next week, I will make him forget about it. Felix smirked coldly. 7 days later. Everyone with deep pockets managed to get themselves a ticket for this decisive battle between Felix and High Chieftain Lakaka. Although 4 opponents of Felix had forfeited, this didn't make anyone feel too sure that Felix would ace this fight as well. They knew that when dealing with spatial manipulation, everything was possible. Felix was dealing with no one but the best spatial elementalist in the Alliance. So, everyone knew that this battle was going to be difficult for both sides. Even the gambling dens thought the same, as the winning odds were somewhat fair this time. Whoosh whoosh. After a passionate introduction by Sir Victoire, Felix and High Chieftain Lakaka were teleported into the middle of a peaceful ocean that had multiple small islands situated here and there. The environment is somewhat in favor of King Maxwell. Emperor Local stated. Well, Lakaka has no right to complain. With his spatial manipulation, the entire universe is in his favor. Queen Allura defended Felix before anyone could mention that luck was on his side. Too bad, even if he is fighting him in a poison swamp under a rainy thunderstorm, it won't matter much. Queen Alfreda shook her head. Chief Lakaka's fighting style is just too impossible to deal with. When they were reminded of his shrewd fighting style, they couldn't help but agree with her. This is going to be a tough one. What do you think? You are being awfully quiet back there. Empress Scarlet asked with a gentle smile as she glanced at Elder Dragon. Scar, don't annoy me. Elder Dragon narrowed his eyes coldly at her and ignored her question, making her chuckle in amusement. It was clear to everyone that Elder Dragon seemed a bit conflicted about this fight. On one hand, he wanted Felix to win so he could fight him and teach him a lesson, but on the other hand, his rational sense wanted Felix to lose to avoid this entire farce all along. In his eyes, it was fun and games before Felix showed him that he could literally survive even nukes during his fight with Bimid. Now, even when his pride refused to admit it, Elder Dragon knew that Felix was going to be the toughest opponent in his entire life. 3, 2, 1. Fight. Fortunately, no one paid him any more attention after the battle was kicked off. As expected, he didn't hesitate to hide in another dimension. Felix commentated as he narrowed his eyes at High Chieftain Lakaka's previous location. The instant the fight started, he opened a spatial portal and disappeared into it, leaving him all alone standing above the ocean. I am going to show you what real spatial abilities look like. High Chieftain Lakaka sneered in his mind as he teleported 100 meters above Felix's head. He was so close to him, yet so far as Felix seemed like he didn't sense his existence in the slightest. Meanwhile, the viewers were able to see both sides on the big screen, making them hold their breaths in anticipation at this sight that resembled the peace before the storm. The Gates of Eurasian. High Chieftain paused for a second before uttering coldly, "Open." Suddenly, Felix picked up on thousands of spatial irregularities happening around him. It didn't matter if it was the sky, the surface of the ocean, or below it. The entire space seemed like it was thrown into a hot pot as it kept cracking apart, leaving long and chaotic fissures. Felix recognized them immediately to be spatial gates, leading to other dimensions. There were thousands of them, causing even the most knowledgeable viewer to be overwhelmed by their sheer numbers. Before the viewers could react, those spatial fissures seemed to turn brighter and brighter until long thin spatial blades were launched from them at an insane speed. All the spatial fissures released at least one, making the viewers absolutely dumbfounded by the sight of thousands of spatial blades flying in a single direction and into a single target. Teleportation. Without hesitation, Felix decided to teleport to another area, knowing that his destruction immunity wouldn't save him from being sliced by those blades. He might be immune to penetration, blowing force, and even slices, but not from spatial blades. That's because spatial blades cut the space itself, not the target. In other words, Felix's body would be sliced thoroughly even with his destruction immunity. Spatial lockdown. Unfortunately, before his teleportation hex could manifest, High Chieftain Lakaka used his spatial manipulation to lock the entire area around Felix, making it impossible for anyone to enter or leave it. You better start dancing, my little hamster. High Chieftain Lakaka smiled coldly as he watched Felix's face turn for the worst. Splash! Splash! Felix was forced to evade the thousands of spatial blades that were raining down on him with the grace of a dancer as his body was fluid and quick. His motions were almost hypnotic as he appeared to glide between the lethal blades with ease. Because he was standing on an ocean, he fully utilized his water manipulation to his advantage, allowing him to slide on the surface and even create uniquely shaped waves to surf on them, not needing to even sprint. The viewers were left in awe at the way his body changed positions in seemingly impossible ways. He was always inches away from the spatial blades as they whizzed past him and clashed with the others. Landlord isn't getting touched. Sir Victoire commentated excitedly. While the viewers shared his excitement, High Chieftain Lakaka merely sneered in irritation at his inability to hit Felix even though he used thousands of spatial blades in such a tight area. Let's see how you will dodge this. High Chieftain Lakaka stopped trying to play around with Felix and went for his ultimate attack. He channeled his energy on all of those fissures and started forcing them to completely rip apart. He is already using spatial collapse. King Maxwell really got under his nerves. Emperor Local stated as he watched those spatial fissures getting wider and longer like two invisible hands were pulling them apart. If it was just one spatial fissure, it wouldn't have been such a problem, but this was happening to thousands of them simultaneously in a small spatial area. Oh no! Our Lord will be deleted. Why isn't he teleporting away? Holy sh*t. Are space worms supposed to be this freaking scary? Felix's fans and the rest of the viewers had their stupefied eyes on the unforgivable sight of those fissures connecting with each other and causing the space to collapse much faster. Even the ocean seemed to be getting disorientated and cracked apart, going against the laws of physics. Felix was right in the middle of all of this chaos, and his solemn expression made everyone realize that this situation was extremely dire for him. This is what blind confidence gets you. The moment High Chieftain Lakaka saw the last spatial cracks connect, he uttered coldly, "Collapse." Just like a magic trick, the sky, the ocean, and everything had shattered apart like a hammer smashing into a mirror, causing multiple faces of realities to appear on each broken piece of space. This horrific and mind-bending spatial collapse was rushing toward Felix, seemingly seeking to erase him from existence. It's over. Just as most viewers began seeing Felix using the surrender coupon to save his own skin, this thought fell apart the moment they spotted Felix's entire grimace change to an indifferent from solemn one. Before they could even think too much about this sudden change, their focus was stolen by the sight of a dark red trident manifesting in the blink of an eye in his right hand. Then, without an ounce of hesitation, Felix turned around with pitch-black demonic eyes and launched the red trident like an Olympian spear thrower. To the absolute shock of the viewers and even High Chieftain Lakaka, the trident was flying in his exact direction. Before his mind could register that this red trident might pose a threat to him even inside another dimension, it had already arrived right in front of his face. Erupt! With the coldest look ever, Felix merely snapped his finger, seemingly detached from the fact that space around him was collapsing. Impossible! This was the last thought that coursed on High Chieftain Lakaka's mind after the dark red trident exploded and took everything around with it. Everything in the literal sense, as not a single concept was not marked, causing reality itself to get deleted from existence. What the? Is this real? My God! Elder Dragon and the rest of the spectators' stunned pupils reflected nothing but a giant patch of nothingness in place of High Chieftain Lakaka. It was like a chaotic portal to the Void Realm, but at the same time, every one of them felt that it was nowhere that. Although the Void Realm was a realm of nothingness, void energy and void creatures still existed in it. But this patch of nothingness was legit an utter void, where not a single particle could exist in it. All of them were hit with that horrific sensation simultaneously, like their minds telling them that nothing was scarier than this patch of nothingness. In the blink of an eye, their pupil reflected normal space again as that patch of nothingness disappeared as suddenly as it appeared, akin to a mere mirage. If it wasn't for the disappearance of High Chieftain Lakaka, anyone would have believed that. As they slowly turned to look at Felix, they found him still standing in the same place with the same indifferent expression. The only difference between then and now was that the ocean had returned to its peaceful self after the spatial fissures broke into light particles. L1 Terrari N0V3L hosted the first appearance of this chapter at N0vel.B1N. No one noticed before, but Felix's confidence was oozing out of him like the entire fight from the get-go was under meticulous calculation. Their assumption was correct, as Felix's plan was to act trapped and hopeless from the get-go to create a single perfect opportunity to sneak an attack on High Chieftain Lakaka. To do that, he had to make sure that he wouldn't find out that he was capable of seeing him with his evil vision even through dimensions. Congratulations to Landlord for winning the battle and becoming the second Supreme. Queen AI suddenly announced 3 times across the stadium after Sir Vixior remained silent a bit too long. With each announcement echoing in their ears, more and more viewers began snapping out of their daze. The first thing they did was look at each other to see if they weren't the only ones seeing that freakishly horrific scene. When they confirmed it, the crowd went absolutely haywire. What the F***ck was that? Did Landlord just delete an entire patch of reality? This must be a joke. No one can have such power. Whether it was Felix's fans or his haters, none of them were able to wrap their heads around what had just happened. Even the 10 rulers seemed stupefied, as they had never seen or heard before about a destruction ability capable of erasing reality as they know it. I already had an assumption that destruction elementalists should potentially be able to destroy even concepts. Empress Emily said with a somewhat satisfied tone, "This confirms it." While Elder Dragon's heart was beating out of his chest and the others seemed unable to accept the reality before them, Empress Emily cared only about new knowledge and data. Meanwhile, the primogenitor's reaction was quite different than everyone else. He really lucked out on a concept destruction ability, not bad. Erebus commentated. F***ing hell, how is this fair? Cherif cursed as he glared at Felix's masters. The F***ck you want my champion to do against yours when he is this stacked? You weren't talking about fairness when your sponsored race was thrashing everyone else. Thor chuckled. This is different and you know it. Cherif huffed heated smoke through his nostrils. Your boy seems geared up to literally counter Berserth. He has immunity to fire, he has destruction immunity, he can absorb any kind of force, and now he is even able to destroy concepts. If I didn't know you any better, I would have believed that you guys have been plotting against him from the start. Hormungandr and Thor laughed out loud at his irritation, knowing that this situation was really upsetting for anyone. Bastards! Cherif got even more pissed off at their reaction. I guess it's time for you to feel what's like to be the underdog. Kumiho giggled, teasing him as well. If anyone heard that she named Elder Dragon as the underdog before this fight, they would have honestly laughed it out. But now? Not even the dumbest viewer had an ounce of confidence in Elder Dragon's possibility to defeat Felix. L.A. Landlord, is it possible to know a bit about your last attack on High Chieftain Lakaka? Sir Victoire asked with a somewhat shaky voice after Felix got teleported back to the stadium. Nope. Felix brought the mic near his mouth and said with a flat tone as he looked at the sky, but don't worry, I am not planning on using it on Elder Dragon. He deserves a slow and honorable ending for his hard work on the Alliance's development. Before Sir Victoire could continue the interview, Felix took off again. From his emotionless tone, it was hard for the viewers to discern if he was being real or sarcastic. But not the 10 rulers. Everyone glanced at Elder Dragon, whose livid and hateful expression could kill anyone with a mere look. When he realized that everyone was staring at him, he gave them one last murderous look before logging out. He didn't say anything, but they understood that his heart was burning with fury and he needed to vent it off on anything. So, who wants to bet against my little junior? Queen Allura grinned faintly, I accept only bets above 1 trillion. After Felix returned to his house, Queen Ai revived High Chieftain Lakaka automatically as he still possessed a revival coupon. When he opened his eyes, the first thing that came to mind was the red trident and sudden nothingness, like his existence mattered less than dust before reality's destruction. He didn't kill me. High Chieftain Lakaka murmured after his heartbeats calmed down a bit. What are you talking about? Are you okay? Nobili asked with a worried tone. She teleported immediately to his house after his death, knowing that Queen Ai would revive him there. Landlord, he let me live. He repeated again to the confusion of his wife, who had seen him literally getting wiped out. High Chieftain Lakaka wasn't in the mood to explain himself. He might not know about concept destruction abilities. Still, he was smart enough to realize that Felix's ability had utterly erased the entire reality and all the dimensions in that single area. This chapter was first shared on the N0v3LB1N platform. That's why he was killed off even through dimensions. This meant, his soul should have been also completely erased from existence, which would make it impossible for Queen Ai to revive him even if she wanted. In other words, Felix had been merciful to him. I guess Elder Dragon isn't going to make it. High Chieftain Lakaka smiled wryly. He discerned that Felix wasn't of the merciful type at all, especially to his enemies. This made him understand that the only reason he was still standing here was due to his position, as Felix wouldn't be able to escape the public's anger if he killed off both Elder Dragon and High Chieftain Lakaka in less than a month. Those two were part of the alliance's backbone, as one had founded the entire alliance and participated in its development from the very start, while the other controlled the biggest transportation network in the universe. Their death wasn't simple anymore, as it would affect the entire populace as a whole, and if Felix killed them both for real, there would be absolute mayhem arising. Whether one hated or loved Elder Dragon, no one could ignore his ironclad authority that kept everyone behaving. Most importantly, those two were needed badly when the Alliance would attempt to explore the other side of the universe. If one of them had to go while avoiding the public's anger, then it was a no-brainer that Felix would choose Elder Dragon. I still have no idea what you are talking about. Nobili was baffled by her husband's behavior. There is no need to know. High Chieftain Lakaka replied. Okay. She paused before asking with a displeased tone, so what are we going to do about that bastard? Nothing, from today onward, we have nothing to do with either him or his races. High Chieftain Lakaka answered with a solemn tone to make her understand that he wasn't joking around. As an old soul, he understood when to push and when to stop. His life was still ongoing only because Felix decided that his enmity with him came nowhere close to the one with Elder Dragon. He had no plans to change this after knowing that Felix could kill him even through dimensions. This didn't mean that he planned on cozying up to Felix and becoming his friend, but at least, he wouldn't be on his throat all the time. While High Chieftain Lakaka was celebrating his second chance at life and making changes in his attitude towards Felix, Elder Dragon was seen pacing back and forth inside his gigantic ancient and deserted throne chamber. As he was walking back and forth, a hologram was keeping up with him. It had this sentence written on it. You have been challenged by the second Supreme Landlord for your title. You have 7 days to accept the challenge. It had been more than 5 minutes now since he had received the challenge. One would assume that he would have accepted it almost instantaneously after hearing him speaking about teaching Felix a lesson all the time. But Elder Dragon was starting to have doubts about this fight, something that was as unbelievable as Queen Ai breaking her rules. As the strongest and most authoritative figure in the entire alliance for more than 2 million years, Elder Dragon had never once felt a sense of doubt when it came to a fight. In this exact throne chamber was when he looked down on Felix akin to an ant. Yet, look at him now, pacing back and forth, thinking about how to kill such a monstrosity. How can I kill him? How? Fire won't work. Physical confrontations will backfire on me, and if he decides to use destruction abilities while I am nearby, even my scales won't save me. Elder Dragon mumbled. While Felix said that he had no intention of using the concept destruction trident in their battle, Elder Dragon didn't trust it one bit. Even if he kept his word, he could still use other destruction abilities, which were also potent against him. The only thing in my arsenal is my corrosion attribute. His destruction immunity doesn't work against corrosion. Elder Dragon frowned, but this isn't nearly enough. Elder Dragon knew that Felix had multiple methods to defend against his corrosion. This made him understand that if he wanted to kill Felix, he needed to attack him non-stop until he dropped dead, not giving him a single chance to escape, heal his wounds, or use defensive measures against his corrosion. This wasn't easy in the slightest, as Felix's strength was high enough to keep up with him even if he was stronger by more than 100,000 BF. That's because Felix still had lightning-quick reflexes in addition to size manipulation, which would boost his strength and reaction speed to somewhat match Elder Dragon. He knew this was going to happen. If I want to pull this off, I need a massive upgrade. Elder Dragon halted his pacing and stared at his scaled fist with a solemn look. I need to reach that level even if just temporarily. Elder Dragon might have pride that was as big as the sky, but he wasn't foolish to go into a battle without preparation while knowing that the odds weren't too great for him. I guess it's time to take those. He extended his palm forward and beamed a large wooden chest that seemed to be releasing a fearsome and pressuring aura. It did nothing to Elder Dragon, but if a commoner was before it, he would most definitely be forced on his knees without the ability to stand back up again. Elder Dragon reached out with his hand and caressed the chest in a gentle manner as he walked around it. A moment later, he stopped in front of a thick lock and ripped it apart with his claws, not bothering to use the key even though he had it. It was clear that he would be done with the chest after this. It's been a while, he murmured after opening the chest's lid and seeing its content. If other royal dragons or even red dragons saw the content, their reaction would be drastically different. No one would feel weird about it as the chest was half filled with a massive quantity of royal gemstones of different sizes and colors. Just a simple calculation from a first look would make anyone assume that there were thousands if not tens of thousands of royal gemstones in it. It might sound not a lot, but one should never forget that each royal gemstone represented a royal dragon, not a red dragon, but a royal one. In this day and age, there were barely 1,000 of them alive in all 4 clans combined. Yet, Elder Dragon had a big-ass chest with such an unbelievable quantity stored inside like they were pieces of jewelry. I never thought there will come a day when I need to exhaust all of my resources. Elder Dragon sighed as he picked up a massive blue royal gemstone. Since only green, white, and black dragons were still alive in this era, this clearly belonged to an ancient dragon from the massacre. It wasn't the only one inside the chest, which implied that Elder Dragon had never absorbed all of the collected ancient royal stones from the ancestral dimensional pocket. Yet, he was still capable of reaching hundreds of kilometers in size and possess more than 700,000 BF in physical strength alone. As for the rest of the royal gemstones, they obviously belonged to the dead royal dragons throughout his long rulership. I will mostly need a month or so to finish absorbing them. Elder Dragon glanced at the holographic challenge and waved it away, knowing that he needed to delay the battle as much as he could. He placed the blue gemstone on top of his purple royal gemstone and closed his eyes shut, beginning the absorption process right away. If he managed to finish this entire batch, one could only wonder if it would be enough for him to cross past 1 million BF and become considered a deity. If he pulled it off, the upcoming battle was really going to take a sharp turn for everyone involved. While Elder Dragon was going through royal gemstones one by one rapidly, he had absolutely no clue that he was being monitored by a Void Nation's spy from the Void Realm. This chapter was first shared on the N0v3LB1N platform. I have to report this. The Void Nation's spy swiftly switched his focus to his wisp of consciousness inside of Nemo's consciousness space. Then, he went to the department responsible for accepting all the intel from those spies, which were situated on all of the inner circle race leaders. He forwarded the intel to his superior officer and he took it to the councilman responsible for his department. It was none other than Einir. Good work, the king will be pleased. Einir praised with a head nod at the officer before taking this intel to Felix's permanent wisp of consciousness inside the throne chamber. My king, I have just been informed that Elder Dragon is absorbing an unfathomable amount of royal gemstones in his chamber. Einir went straight to the point. How large of an amount? Felix narrowed his eyes. He said more than thousands. Einir replied with a solemn tone. You serious? Felix was stunned by the news. He expected hundreds at most since royal dragons' numbers were few and they were one of the hardest creatures to drop dead, but thousands? He knew that something wasn't right. Get him here right now. Felix ordered the spy's attendants. Einir nodded and sent the order down the chain of command. Since they were in Nemo's consciousness, the spy swiftly teleported in front of Felix after getting permission. Show us. King Arthur ordered as he sat on a chair that was slightly behind the throne. The rest of the councilmen were also here as they have a permanent wisp of consciousness staying here. The spy quickly created a consciousness mirror and linked it with the eyes of his real body. This allowed everyone to watch Elder Dragon eating through a mountain of royal gemstones like there was no tomorrow. How can he have this much? Shocked, Miriam asked what was on everyone's mind. Did he keep hoarding royal gemstones for millions of years? The ruiner frowned. It must be. Mammon shared, only in the last 2 million years did his strength become widely known due to news transfer being much faster, but in reality, he was already pretty dominating way before the foundation of the alliance as far as I remember him. So, if he really decided to keep hoarding royal gemstones for millions of years, no one would really know. That makes the most sense. Felix nodded with a stern expression. The public was under the assumption that Elder Dragon was born this strong while the royal family was the only one to know his secret. Even red dragons merely assumed royal gemstones found in the ancestral dimensional pocket to be bloodline stones. As one of the first ones to explore the dimensional pocket and learn from the ancestral dragon how to absorb those royal gemstones, he had gotten immensely lucky. At that point in time, Elder Dragon had an unfathomable amount of ancient royal gemstones to collect from the ancestral dimension since no one had touched them before. So, it was more than possible for him to use what needed to get stronger and keep the rest saved for later. This only applied to ancient royal gemstones. The ones belonging to this era's royal dragons could easily be hoarded through millions of years and reach a good amount even if royal dragons were hard to die. This doesn't really matter now. Candace said with a serious tone, if he absorbed all of this, his strength should be boosted by at least 100,000 BF. His strength should be already higher than our king by 100,000 minimum. Miriam analyzed, the physical force really doesn't matter against destruction immunity, but his reaction speed will make the battle one-sided, and with his corrosion attribute, he will be dealing considerable damage. This was exactly what went through Felix's mind as he understood that just because he couldn't be destroyed, it didn't mean that he wouldn't feel pain. If there was a big disparity in strength between them, he could get beaten up for a while and then Elder Dragon retreat until he lost all of the absorbed force. This would make the battle last forever until Felix gave in to the agony. Don't you think it's possible for him to cross 1 million? Candace asked. It should be impossible even with this quantity. Mammon answered, the last 100,000 is much harder to push through than the previous 900,000 combined. If it wasn't for this, there wouldn't be a drastic difference between a deity and a mortal. Everyone nodded in approval, even Felix. That's why Felix was certain that it would be impossible for him to cross the 1 million mark even if he added another bloodline. It would be achievable through a massive godly enhancement and only Origin Realm could offer it. However, Elder Dragon has his innate dragon fury that enhances his strength immensely in addition to other temporary measures like scrolls and potions. Candace frowned, so, even if he couldn't achieve it with this batch of royal gemstones, he can pull it off inside the game temporarily. The moment everyone heard this, their expression became somewhat bad. Every one of them knew that Elder Dragon's strength and reaction speed would be so massively better than Felix, he could literally play around with him like a toy if he went all out. All of Felix's previous confrontations with primogenitors happened while they were using no less than 15% of their strength. So, he never really experienced the true terror of a being above the million mark going all out on him. It's still a big if. Felix spoke calmly, even if he somehow pulled it off, I have my ways to deal with him. This new development might be scary for others, but it made Felix merely take this battle more seriously. His confidence in his victory was still unshaken as the tools in his possession made him incapable of losing before Elder Dragon. He couldn't wait to show him this kind of despair firsthand. I am disappointed that all of those royal gemstones will go to waste. Asna sighed. Likewise. Felix was honestly irritated by the sight of Elder Dragon's absorption process. It was tough for him to watch when he was struggling to get his hands on a single royal gemstone after he already exhausted his inventory. He wanted royal gemstones more than minerals as they boost his strength much greater. After all, they were concentrated dragon's bloodlines compared to merely absorbing elemental energy from minerals. How about you steal Elder Dragon's corpse after you deal with him? Asna suggested. His pride might not make him accept that he can die in the first place, but other clan heads don't think the same. Felix shook his head, I am certain that they will be waiting like hyenas the moment he dies to harvest his royal gemstone. Elder Dragon's royal gemstone could be considered the most precious one in the entire universe at the moment. Those clan heads would never give up on it to either of them, don't even mention to an outsider. If I decided to steal it from them, they will find out that it was related to me. Felix added. As the king of the Void Nation, he would be the biggest suspect, as no one would be daring enough to steal something from dragons and do it as well as him. The only way to get it is through a contract with Elder Dragon then. Candace suggested, if you turn this battle into a death match, he will most definitely agree to the deal. Elder Dragon wanted only one thing from Felix, and that was his death. Unlike him, he had no method of killing Felix's soul, which meant his revival coupon would get in the way. This should be pissing off Elder Dragon to no end, making him accept the deal right away. No, thank you. I might be confident in my capabilities to win the battle, but I am not that foolish to hand my head on a plate for him. Felix said composedly, I would rather steal it from the dragon clans and deal with their accusations. This decision might make Felix seem like a coward, but he really didn't give a sh*t. If he didn't have the ability to kill Elder Dragon, then he would go for a death match deal. But since he could do it easily with his soul poison, he wasn't a retard to shoot himself in the foot, especially when there were other ways to get the royal gemstone. Keep an eye on him. 247. He might give us an indication of the end result about his enhancements. Felix ordered the spy one last time before switching his focus to his main consciousness. Will do, my king. 7 days later. The challenge has been accepted, the battle's date will be announced soon. Queen Ai notified. He sure took his sweet time. Felix glanced at the notification with an emotionless expression. He already expected that Elder Dragon would delay the battle as much as possible to finish the absorption process. From his spy's point of view, he had just finished 30% of the amount. You think he will absorb everything before the battle? Asna wondered. The SG committee might schedule the battle in 15 days and he could do nothing about it. Yes, he could. Felix shook his head. He might not be able to order them directly, but they won't reject a request from him to push the battle back a month. Felix understood that the SG committee would not refuse Elder Dragon for such a harmless request. In fact, they would probably welcome it to build more hype around the battle and jack up the tickets' prices. Felix didn't seem to care much about such little schemes as he continued focusing on his training and integration process. Elder Dragon wasn't the only one benefiting from the delay, as Felix planned on hitting 75% in his integration before the battle too. Days went by in a jiffy, and before long, the day of the promised fight had arrived. If a single word could describe the Alliance's atmosphere, it would most definitely be craziness. Everyone had been counting the days in anticipation of this one-in-a-lifetime battle, knowing full well that millions of years could pass and no one could top it off. This sort of historical moment made everyone interested in watching the battle, even if they absolutely hated games or fights. With this sort of interest, the viewership could be said to have absolutely smashed the record. 840 trillion concurrent live viewers and still rapidly climbing. Am I dreaming? Sir Victoire gulped a mouthful to ease his rising agitation. There was still an entire half an hour before the battle began, and the streaming viewership was already closing on the impossible number of 1 quadrillion. Ever since the foundation of the Alliance, no one had even managed to hit 500 trillion total viewership. Yet, this battle was already close to doubling and even going past it. As the judge and MC, this was a massive honor that every other MC desired more than anything. Though, such numbers were possible only because the SG Comite had decided to stream the battle for free instead of putting it behind the monthly subscription. This made everyone ignore the illegal streaming sources and just watch from the official website. Those old fogies are really geniuses to take this road. Sir Victoire praised this approach. He understood that it might seem like the SG committee made a fatal mistake, as it would be losing an insane amount of profit from the streaming revenue, but in reality, he would have done the same. Making this battle free made it insanely easy for everyone to watch it instead of jumping through hoops to spectate it from illegal sources in the dark network. Since there was a considerable percentage of people who never bothered to even watch a single Supremacy game and preferred other entertainment sources, watching this game might change their minds and bring them into the platform. After all, Felix and Elder Dragon were considered the two top G of the Alliance, and their battle was bound to be legendary. There is sure a lot of attraction today, hey. Asna commentated while lying her head on top of Felix's lap and watching the stream of the overcrowded stadium. If I still cared about my merch, this will really be the biggest stage for advertisement. Felix chuckled, knowing that his agent Emma and a business manager would choke him to death if he missed such a heaven-sent opportunity. But, he really didn't care any more about supremacy coins as he had finally reached the stage where he could never run out of money and there wasn't anything that interested him to buy. Before long, the half-hour was concluded and both Felix and Elder Dragon were given warnings that they would be teleported to the arena in 2 minutes. I will be right back. Felix smiled at Asna as he gave her a gentle kiss. Go kick some ass. Asna cheered while looking lovingly into his eyes, knowing that Felix had prepared so much for this day. In her eyes, it was finally time for him to get paid for his efforts. Whoa-ah-ah-ah. Clap. 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 Landlord. The moment Felix and Elder Dragon were teleported to the stadium, their eardrums almost ruptured from the insanity before him. No one was chanting harmoniously or even screaming on the same note. Some were clapping their hands until they turned red, some were screaming gibberish with smoking ears, seemingly about to have a stroke, and some were yelling out Felix's name. Alas, no matter how much his fans tried to chant his name on the same note to overpower the noise, they keep failing non-stop. This was to be expected as most of Felix's fans failed to get tickets even when they wanted to go into debt. The cheapest live tickets price was inflated to 20 million coins. A sum that shattered the hopes of every loyal fan as these prices could never be afforded by commoners. In other words, most of the current live spectators were rich figures across the entire universe, stretching from influencers, streamers, businessmen, actors, singers, and the list goes on. Felix honestly wasn't bothered in the slightest by this. He merely kept his emotionless eyes affixed on Elder Dragon who was standing 10 meters away from him. I am surprised you didn't come down here while sitting on a throne. Felix taunted with a faint snicker. Believe it or not, most viewers had never seen Elder Dragon standing up before in his humanoid form. L1 Terrari N0V3L hosted the first appearance of this chapter at N0vel.B1N. He was always on his throne, appearing lofty and staring down at everyone with a condescending expression. I am surprised you even decided to show up. Didn't your spy show you what you will be dealing with? Elder Dragon replied with an indifferent tone. This statement didn't catch anyone by surprise besides the ones having no clue what he was talking about. Felix and his councilmen already had a great inkling that Elder Dragon knew about their spy since he would be stupid to not think that he wouldn't be spied on by the Void Nation. Most of the 10 rulers believed the same. Too bad, they had absolutely no way of proving it and they knew that accusing Felix without evidence was useless. So, they were forced to drastically change the way they act and take all important decisions to the UVR. Elder Dragon clearly didn't give a sh*t about being spied on or Felix finding out about his enhancements. You must be really confident. Felix smiled, I hope your confidence lives up to the expectations. I assure you, it will. Elder Dragon said one last time with narrowed eyes before turning around and walking to the other side of the arena. Cough, ladies and gentlemen, you have already been waiting for far too long. So, without any further delay, how about we kick this historical battle off right away? Sir Victoire was forced to give up on both his introduction and interviewing plans the moment he noticed Felix and Elder Dragon walking to their positions. He understood that the tension was already too intense to put himself amidst it. Thus, he swiftly helped them reach their positions by teleporting them and began the countdown with everyone involved. 3, 2, 1. Fight! The arena chosen was a normal vast land space with forests, rivers, lakes, and some hills across thousands of kilometers. Elder Dragon stood tall above a moderate-sized green hill in his humanoid form, towering over the nearby trees. Under the sunlight, his scales glistened and reflected the hues of the surroundings. His pupils shrank to slits as he locked eyes on Felix's infrared aura. A deep growl came from his throat as he inhaled deeply, bringing in the surrounding air. In his mouth, a condensed ball of black fire that was crackling with evil force formed as he exhaled. Elder Dragon directed the lethal bullet at his adversary with a sudden flip of his head. The small but deadly ball of black fire sped across the space while leaving a trail of smoke in its wake, turning trees into ashes, and evaporating rivers from the sheer propelled heat. Although it was coming at Felix with an unprecedented speed, he wasn't fazed in the slightest. He kept his emotionless eyes on it until it was right in front of him. Then, he merely slapped it with the back of his hand in a single swift motion, causing it to get distorted in slow motion before its trajectory was changed forcefully. Boom! A blistering inferno of extreme heat and a charred, smoldering heap were all that were left behind when the black fire bullet ended up landing at a hill right behind Felix. The viewers were left staring with mouth agape at the arising mushroom cloud and released shockwave that erased more than 1,000 kilometers around it. What a start! Sir Victoire found it hard to commentate as everything happened way too fast for him to comprehend. The entire attack took less than a second and Elder Dragon had successfully aimed and even landed a monstrous nuke in this duration even though the distance was thousands of kilometers. This was just too shocking even for the dragons. While the viewers were cheering idiotically at such spellbinding fireworks, only the dragons understood just how difficult to pull this attack off. To condense such a powerful fire orb, I need at least half a minute, that's if the orb didn't end up collapsing on itself. Clan head Igos shared with a solemn tone as he sat with his peers. Likewise. Clan head Azastirth took a deep breath to calm his emotions, he is really in a different league. Unfortunately for him, he is facing an opponent in the same freakish league. Clan head Kir soon mentioned as he eyed Felix's infrared aura amidst the mushroom cloud. He didn't move even an inch from his position after eating a direct nuke. Under the spooked eyes of the viewers, Felix merely walked outside of the smoke with his entire body as illuminated as a light bulb. His eyes were as emotionless as before, but this time, they were completely covered in green electrical charges. Before anyone could react, Felix disappeared from his place, leaving behind him an explosion of green electricity and a deep crater. Boom! The moment he resurfaced again on the big screen, everyone felt chills course on their spine at the sight of him blowing Elder Dragon's entire hill into dust. As for Elder Dragon, he managed to evade Felix's punch as he anticipated this counterattack. In fact, the only reason he fired that nuke while knowing that it would do nothing but power up Felix was to bait him to engage in hand-to-hand combat. Whoosh! Let's see what you can do when your masters aren't here to save you. Elder Dragon remarked coldly as he unleashed his shimmering dreadful sharp claws. He launched himself at hypersonic speed in direction of Felix, who was left deep inside the self-created crater. Lifelike black flames emerged from Elder Dragon's scales and coated his claws and entire body, making him resemble a demonic evil soul. Clying. The inaugural upload of this chapter took place via Novel Bin. Instead of the sound of flesh ripping apart, a metallic noise echoed thunderously from the dusty crater, catching the viewers by surprise. Whoosh whoosh! Some expected that Felix had used his battleaxe to block Elder Dragon's claws, but when those two flew out of the crater, they realized that they were wrong. Are those crystallized claws? King Tresnor raised his eyebrows in surprise as he eyed Felix's hands that were wearing two sets of white adamantine crystallized claws. They seemed tinted with a hint of green color and had long purplish lines inside each claw. They resembled Elder Dragon's claws greatly in both size and shape, which made him exhibit a frigid expression. Are you mocking me? Elder Dragon narrowed his eyes coldly at Felix who was still glowing. In his eyes, it was just a taunting stun to use his exact weapon to fight him. Even the viewers felt that Felix was taking it too far and was being too cocky for his own good. Elder Dragon spent millions of years using those claws to bring ruination to all of his enemies. His fighting style was already close to perfection as those claws were more than just weapons. Now, Felix was daring to combat him using his own fighting style? He is really asking for a beating. Clan head Igos scoffed. Felix didn't bother to answer Elder Dragon's inquiry as he launched himself at him while using his levitation spell. He was also going at a hypersonic speed, making it impossible for the viewers to track him down properly. But for Elder Dragon? Too slow. He sneered as he evaded Felix's claws easily, not pushed to even block them. In the eyes of most of the viewers, they merely appeared like two fast-moving auras, one black and the other green, but in the eyes of the ruiner and strong figures like him, they could see full well that Felix was being played. Based on his reaction speed, he should have crossed 900,000 BF as we expected. Miriam said with a serious tone. This isn't going to end well for our king if he has nothing planned. Mammon remarked. Boom. The moment he said so, Elder Dragon stopped dodging Felix and smashed him in the stomach with a flaming round kick. Felix ate the kick like it was nothing due to his destruction immunity, but he ended up getting completely engulfed in a flood of black flames. Whoosh! Felix emerged from the flames with an indifferent expression even though his skin could be seen getting corroded, leaving black bloody patches. However, before those marks could spread far, they get healed almost instantaneously. You are really the personification of irritation. Elder Dragon said with an irked tone as he realized that Felix's also possessed an insane rejuvenation. This meant even if he relied on his strategy, this fight could literally last forever. Still, he had no other option but to continue his onslaught. Boom boom boom. Felix held his position akin to a mountain even when Elder Dragon kept coming at him over and over again with a flurry of unblockable strikes. Felix allowed himself to get hit most of the time as it was the only way for Elder Dragon to create an opening. Felix took advantage of each slight opportunity he had to launch his own counterattacks with his glistening crystallized claws. Cling! Cling! Unfortunately, Elder Dragon wasn't as generous to allow him free hits. So, even when he left openings, his monstrous reaction speed allowed him to block with his claws, causing sparks to fly all over the place. I am honestly surprised that Landlord's claws aren't destroyed. High Chieftain Lakaka commented with a taken-back expression. Most of his peers and viewers also were under the impression that Felix's claws would break after a couple of clashes even though they were made out of adamantine. That's because Elder Dragon's claws were sharp enough to slice through almost anything. If Felix used normal adamantine gemstones, they would have been indeed shattered a while ago. But, what he used was no other than an extremely condensed version, which enhanced their durability immensely. He really isn't giving me an inch. Felix narrowed his eyes in irritation after another failed attempt to cut through Elder Dragon's scales. He hadn't chosen claws just for the sake of humiliating him, but also because they were the best option to inject soul poison directly through the wounds. All of his claws had small thin tubes filled with liquefied soul poison in the center and connected with the tips. He planned on poisoning his soul with this method since it was impossible for his other poison abilities to touch him when he was completely covered in black flames. In fact, the innate heat released from Elder Dragon right now was covering many kilometers, causing even some faraway trees to get burnt. Felix wasn't feeling it due to his fire immunity, but it didn't mean that it wasn't there. Felix understood that almost any sudden weird movement that he made would alarm Elder Dragon and make it easier for him to dodge whatever ability he used. His reaction speed was just that good, which was normal considering that there was a whopping 200,000 BF difference between them. This was one of the reasons why no one could stand up to the Elder Dragon in the entire alliance. When there was a massive reaction speed, nothing really worked against him since everything would appear in slow motion to him. It didn't matter if one could blow an entire planet with a punch, as long as the attack didn't land, then it was just useless. This was what was happening to Felix right now as he possessed so much in his arsenal, but at the same time, he understood that it would be immensely difficult to land anything on him. Boom! Cling! Cling! Food! The two combatants continued to trade punches, kicks, and some elemental abilities here and there as they were both focused on winning this seemingly impossible conflict. The peaceful and beautiful landscape was turned into an absolute hell as they traveled across the entire place, not stopping their feverish clash for even a split second. I didn't want to use this, but he is clearly afraid of my poison. In the end, Felix was the first to separate from the melee battle and Elder Dragon seemed also cool with it. Both of them looked at each other while being separated by hundreds of meters. Felix's wounds from corrosion healed at a noticeable pace, causing Elder Dragon's irritation to intensify. Felix ignored his look and got rid of his crystallized claws, causing Elder Dragon to raise his guard to the limit. Destruction Cube! Felix uttered with a flat tone as he extended his palm forward. The same dark red aura-like cube manifested from his palm again. However, everyone was taken aback when they noticed that the cube stopped growing after reaching the size of a Rubik cube. Is he going to use it as a projectile? Elder Dragon's expression got solemn as he was warier of destruction abilities than poison. At least poison could react to fire. Destruction was a concept that didn't react to anything and sought pure destruction of anything that it touched. In other words, it didn't matter if his scales had 99% indestructibility, as long as it wasn't 100%, he would be erased by a mere touch. However, Felix didn't throw the cube at him. He merely waved his hand to the side and the small cube began multiplying rapidly until Felix was seen holding into a long sword made out of red cubes. This was the doing of none other than his last active ability, Destruction Infestation. Let's try again, shall we? Felix uttered with a cold tone as he waved the menacing destruction sword around. Elder Dragon's scales tensed up at the sight of the destruction sword, knowing deep down that his situation had just gone from bad to worst. He can't touch me with my reaction speed, but at the same time, I can't risk going on ATA. Before he could finish his thought, his attention was captured by a spherical potion that Felix had beamed. He didn't know what it was for, but he was certain that it wouldn't be good for him. He was right in his assumption as the potion was called Reaction Booster Veil and it was a rank 5 potion with a 5-star difficulty. This was the highest known grade for any potion in the Alliance and Felix was already capable of concocting some of them. Potions with this kind of grade had one of the greatest buffs possible, but at the same time, one of the worst side effects. Yet, Felix drank it in one gulp without an ounce of worry. In less than a second, the potion's effect was already in place as Felix's brain began working on an overdrive akin to overclocking a graphics card. This really feels unnatural, good thing I got used to it during my practices in the past month. Felix uttered with a deep frown as his vision turned slightly distorted for a moment before becoming normal. This potion's effect was extremely potent as it forced the brain to work at least double its speed, which in turn enhanced the reaction speed, allowing Felix to finally match Elder Dragon. Though, it was merely for 5 minutes and the moment the effect ended, Felix would end up with a nasty blood poisoning stemming from his brain. This side effect was extremely potent as it was capable of killing off the user with a chance rate of 90%. But in the case of Felix, this side effect was a joke against his poison immunity. Thank you for waiting, I will make sure to pay you properly. Felix said with a cold smile. Elder Dragon remained quiet and prepared himself for the clash, knowing that there wasn't much for him but to wait. After all, he could neither surrender nor turn his back on a confrontation with his overbearing pride. Whoosh! Abruptly, Felix charged forward with his sword held high, ready to strike Elder Dragon that stood before him. Everything seemed in slow motion in his eyes but Elder Dragon's movements as he could finally capture them in time. So, the moment Elder Dragon attempted to evade his sword, Felix caught him by surprise after changing its trajectory to slice through his massive torso. Elder Dragon's instincts came to play and saved him by forcing his torso to twist abnormally akin to a snake, causing the tip of the sword to fly inches from his black scales. Unfortunately for him, Felix's sword was just as flexible. The inaugural upload of this chapter took place via N0v3LB1N. Blow. With a single command from Felix, the passing sword shattered into multiple red cubes and went through Elder Dragon's body. **T. Elder Dragon's expression turned for the worst as he smelled his death approaching, knowing that those cubes would erase anything they touched. However, he was soon taken aback by an abnormal pain coming from his scales. What the hell? When he scanned his body, he found out that only his black scales were erased, exposing his bloody flesh in the open. It was like he was skinned alive. Whoosh! Without hesitation, Elder Dragon released inner explosive black flames in front of him, causing Felix to get engulfed in them while he was sent far away as the black flames acted like jets. When he put enough distance from Felix, he stopped and examined his body again with seated expression. Bastard! Elder Dragon cursed hatefully as his heartbeats accelerated rapidly at his humiliating appearance. It was like he was standing nude before the entire alliance without anything to hide. He actually marked just his scales. Your boy is really the personification of evil. Erebus chuckled as he stared at Elder Dragon, who covered his entire body with black flames again to hide his exposed flesh. Does he need to go this far? Sheriff wasn't pleased in the slightest by Felix's attitude toward this battle. He realized that Felix had no intention of just ending the fight as fast as possible, but to shatter Elder Dragon's pride completely. This is personal for him. Thor shrugged his shoulders, not caring that his students' actions weren't approved. If Sheriff knew that his champion almost killed Felix if it wasn't for his masters saving him, he wouldn't be opening his mouth now. Elder Dragon literally tried to kill Felix in the past even though there was a massive gap in strength between them. Felix was merely paying what he owed. You need help with that? Felix commented with a faint icy smirk as he eyed Elder Dragon's scales recovering at a slow pace. Dragons might have an amazing rejuvenation, but that's only for external and internal wounds like slashes, blunt attacks, or such. Felix had utterly erased his scales from existence, which meant his body needed to create new ones from the start instead of healing them. I will kill you. Elder Dragon gritted his teeth hatefully as he stared daggers at Felix. I am waiting, but before then, let's play, shall we? Felix laughed a bit menacingly, causing most of the viewers to feel shivers course down their spines. What's that? Sir Victoire commented in confusion after Felix suddenly manifested a long blue cubic sword on his other hand. It was exactly the same as the red one besides the color. He really is as unhinged as our lord. King Mahit thought to himself as he was watching the stream alone in his throne chamber. He knew exactly what Felix was going to do with the blue sword and it felt wrong even for him. Whoosh! Not giving a sh*t about anyone's opinions or feelings, Felix disappeared from his place and appeared right next to Elder Dragon. Then, he swung at him with his blue sword, forcing Elder Dragon to prioritize evading yet again. He couldn't even use his claws to block the swords since they were made out of auras and his black flames were also useless against them. The only legit way to deal with them was by not dealing with them. But Elder Dragon just couldn't accept turning his back on a confrontation and running with his tail tucked between his legs. His pride made it impossible. So, he kept trying his best to remain untouched by the blue sword. Alas, with Felix's reaction speed being on par with him now, it was close to impossible to keep dodging his attacks forever. Whoosh! In the end, Felix used a unique back strike to slice Elder Dragon from the middle with his blue sword. Hey! When the sword went through him, Elder Dragon was left with a stunned expression as he realized that his erased scales had been reconstructed back like they were never deleted before. He looked down once and lifted his head to stare at Felix. When he saw him smiling diabolically, he couldn't help but feel his heart skip a beat. Whoosh! Whoosh! A split second later, Felix sliced through the air with a flurry of strikes from both of his swords, causing Elder Dragon's scales to get erased and then constructing them back on under the dumbfounded eyes of the viewers. No one knew what was going on, making them unable to comprehend this freaky and abnormal scene. They came here to spectate a legendary battle, but it was turned into a one-sided dalliance. Elder Dragon was being shown to the entire universe as nothing but a plaything to Felix as he couldn't even defend himself from having his scales either deleted or reconstructed. It was the peak of humiliating a fighter as it made even idiots recognize the massive gap between Felix and Elder Dragon. The worst part? Most viewers weren't too interested in the fact that Felix was almost immune to every single attack from Elder Dragon. This made it hard to feel any sort of sympathy for Elder Dragon from the majority, as in their eyes, they felt that Elder Dragon should be a god. After all, he was being pumped as the strongest untouchable monster for 2 million years until everyone's image of him was that of an unkillable god. Yet, here he was, being toyed around like a weakling undeserving of an ounce of their respect. Felix spent a lot of his time preparing to give Elder Dragon the worst possible defeat in the history of the universe, and this was merely part of it. Crack! While no one could hear it, Elder Dragon's overbearing godly image was slowly shattering in everyone's minds, whether it was dragons or other viewers. Elder Dragon was the only one who seemed to have heard, or more precisely, felt it happening, even though he couldn't see the viewers. The fight can't end like this. I can't lose my respect. I can't go back to being a nobody. With one inner furious roar, Elder Dragon took off into the sky at an insane speed, using intense flame jets on his legs. Then, he beamed 5 potions that seemed to be filled with bloodish content. He threw them in his horrific mouth with their glass bottles and gulped everything together. Before the viewers could even guess the potions' names, Elder Dragon's body began growing at a rapid pace while changing his form drastically. In less than a second, the transformation was over and Elder Dragon could be seen flying hundreds of kilometers above Felix in his original form. A form that struck terrors in everyone's hearts the moment they saw it. A form that was so majestic, his godly image in everyone's minds was restored instantly. With a wingspan that stretched over hundreds of kilometers, Elder Dragon took to the sky with its powerful wings beating a thunderous rhythm as it soared into the clouds. His body was muscular and sinewy, covered in thick, pitch-black scales that seemed to absorb the light around him. There was nothing to compare with his humanoid form, as his size made the entire battleground seem like a playground for children. Yet, Felix didn't seem fazed in the slightest, even when Elder Dragon covered the entire sky above him. At last. In fact, he actually smiled a little, like he was hoping for Elder Dragon to take this form. Is this really the best decision? King Tresnor frowned, knowing that dragons' original form provide an insane boost to physical strength, but at the same time, it made them more prone to attacks. Usually, this didn't matter to dragons as their scales were capable of reflecting 99% of damage, but against Felix? All Inner Circle leaders knew that he would be nothing more than a free target. He has obviously run out of options. Fisherman Queen Everly shook her head. King Maxwell is just unbeatable. Elder Dragon knew all of this and still took this form. He didn't do so as one last random desperate attempt, he went for it for a precise purpose. I can't kill you as a mortal, but I can play with you just as well as a god. Elder Dragon roared furiously, causing the nearby clouds to get pushed away by the thundering sound wave. It was clear to everyone that his rage had already taken over his mind, as his body seemed to be releasing a visible crimson aura. Dragon Fury! Felix murmured, did he pull it off? Did he cross past his mortal limit? Primogenitors, 10 rulers, and most Inner Circle leaders had looks of expectations and curiosity as they stared at Elder Dragon, wanting to know the same answer. With Elder Dragon's original form being this colossal being, his physical strength meant that he should be actually much closer to the 1 million mark. Though, even if there was just 10,000 BF, it should be extremely difficult for him to cross it with just his innate Dragon Fury's buff. That's why Elder Dragon took those 10 potions, as they were called Immortal Strength Potions. Each was capable of boosting one's physical strength temporarily by a flat 1000 BF regardless of the user body's limitations. Most physical buffing potions were somewhat useless for strong beings like Felix and Elder Dragon, since the body's limitation reduced the buffs significantly. The Immortal Strength Potions were considered not the best by the majority, since the flat increase was trash compared to other buffing potions. But in the case of Elder Dragon, it was exactly what he needed to push past the 1 million line. This is it. This is the feeling of being superior to everyone. This is what I always sought. Elder Dragon remarked with a crazed look as he felt like he had control over every single cell in his body. It was like his soul was finally in tune with his own body, making him have a sort of grandiose feeling like he could control everyone and everything around him. The best part? His reaction speed had been enhanced to the point his entire look of the world was changed. His mind seemed to be working at 100 times the normal speed, making it close to impossible to be ambushed by anything below his reaction speed. This is what it feels to be a god. Elder Dragon smiled coldly as he eyed Felix. I will make sure that you experience it as well. Whoosh! Boom! Everyone was left absolutely stupefied after Elder Dragon disappeared from his location and reappeared in a deep crater on the ground, completely annihilating hundreds of kilometers of surface area. It was so sudden, it was like he teleported. With that massive size of his, it seemed too illogical and abnormal. Damn, the difference is really unbridgeable. Felix smiled wryly as he teleported from the depth of the crater without a single injury on him. He wanted Elder Dragon to go past 1 million line to experience the true strength of primogenitors level beings. He wanted it to be in a real fight so the situation would register in his mind that it was as serious as it could get. But now? He recognized that it was not helpful at all. That's because he also couldn't see Elder Dragon's movement just like everyone else. It was like all mortals were thrown in the same pot against primogenitors level beings regardless of how close they were to them in strength. This test finally convinced Felix that he should stay the F***ck away from the Darkins unless he crossed the 1 million line. Whoosh! Why are you running? Weren't you having fun before? Elder Dragon emerged from the self-created chasm and appeared above Felix, resembling a horrid dragon glaring at a hopeless man in most fantasies. Still, the look of fear or worry that Elder Dragon was fishing from Felix was nowhere on his face. This made him more pissed off as he believed that Felix thought he couldn't die even if he used the corrosion of his flames on him. I will make you regret your choice of not ending me when you had the chance. Elder Dragon opened his enormous mouth wide open, showing his dreadful teeth that were as big as skyscrapers. Then, he gathered an insane quantity of pure black flames in his throat before breathing it towards Felix. It's time to break him completely. Felix grinned diabolically as he stood under the dragon's breath like a bug before a blowtorch. Concept Destruction Trident, Mark Black Flames. Without an ounce of fear, Felix merely created his trademark red trident and held it in front of him. This comical scene made the viewers feel dumbfounded as the trident's size made it seem like a joke compared to the incoming flames. Alas, their reaction was forcefully changed the moment Felix uttered those two words, volume expansion. The 2-meter trident suddenly became as towering as a mountain. N0V3LTR0VE served as the original host for this chapter's release on N0V3LB1N. Felix wasn't holding it anymore but actually hovering in the middle of it with the same unfazed expression. Before the viewers could react to this bewildering scene, a much more shocking one appeared in front of them. The dragon's breath disappeared into the ether the instant it entered the trident's massive body. The viewers might have been left stunned, but no one reacted as strongly as Elder Dragon, whose unblinking eyes refused to move from the massive trident. This scene was the last straw that broke the camel's back, as Elder Dragon's last source of confidence to win this fight stemmed from his black flames. Now, he was watching it getting devoured as if it amounted to nothing. After the dragon's breath ended, Elder Dragon didn't make any other moves. He just seemed frozen place. Meanwhile, Felix created a crystallized throne and sat on it with a carefree expression. He rested his chin on his hand and stared directly into Elder Dragon's enormous slits for a few moments before saying with a flat tone, I allowed you to become a god to show you that even in your supreme form, you still can't amount to anything before me. This statement had cut through Elder Dragon's heart and pride akin to a knife cutting through butter. It pained him more than anything that Felix had done in the entire battle, since he knew that it was the truth. His most precious defenses were nothing against Felix's abilities. His overpowering physical strength was useless against Felix's destruction immunity. His potent and dreadful black flames were a joke against his fire immunity and concept destruction spear. Now, even in his god form, the supposed peak form that no other mortal had attained before, he was still incapable of defeating Felix. To add salt to an injury? All of this was happening live in front of more than 1 quadrillion viewers. so, how about you save me the trouble of decapitating your head and just bow down before me? Felix said with an indifferent tone, bow down and accept me as the one and only Grand Supreme. Then, I might consider giving you an honorable death. Felix was this bold and confident in his statements on love because he was certain that Elder Dragon would never opt for surrender. In this battle, he had only two choices, either death or victory. Felix was making him understand that if he decided to bow down, he would spare him and kill him normally, allowing him to get revived. Obviously, this wasn't going to happen as well, which meant everything that Felix said was just to piss and humiliate Elder Dragon even more. My saga can't end like this. I have built this entire era with my own hands. It can't end like this. It can't. Felix's taunting words sure took a toll on Elder Dragon as his mind and heart refused to admit that he had already lost his Grand Supreme title. A title that he possessed ever since the foundation of the SG Alliance, as no one managed to take it from him. While other figures in the top 10 were referred to as Supremes, only the number 1 was given the title the Grand Supreme. It was the most authoritative and noble title in all of the platforms, as it was given only to the strongest being in the entire alliance. Now, Elder Dragon was watching it slip through his fingers in the most humiliating manner possible. My saga can't end like this. When rationality failed to help, his emotions took over, causing him to charge toward Felix with a maddening look. Boo! The throne was shattered instantly and Felix was launched into a cannonball into the ground, breaking through one hill after another. When he stopped, he merely jumped out of the rubble while dusting his ass in a carefree manner. The giant red trident followed him along like an aura that was a piece of him. Boom! Before the viewers could react, Elder Dragon continued assaulting Felix with his overbearing strength. This is a bit sad to watch. Emperor Local sighed, how the great have fallen. This day was bound to come eventually. Queen Alfreda shook her head, nothing is constant in this universe besides the universe itself. In her eyes, everyone and everything had an expiration date regardless of strength or longevity. Some fall in a mere day after their birth and some need billions of years, but everyone had an expiration date. I have never thought I will see the composed and indifferent Elder Dragon losing his mind in my life. King Maxwell is really something. The Fukin's Lord Aitson commentated as he sat with his peers. Everyone smiled wryly as they watched Elder Dragon continue bringing utter destruction into the battlefield without any positive results. Felix wasn't even scratched in the pain of those collisions. He took them like a champ as his pain tolerance was already on an unfathomable level due to his insane integrations. The inaugural upload of this chapter took place via N0v3LB1N. Felix neither defended himself nor attempted to escape. He allowed Elder Dragon to continue venting his anger and hopelessness on him. He knew that sooner or later, his temporarily boosted strength would run out and he would suffer from the side effects of the potions as well as his dragon fury. Then, he could make his move and end this once and for all. As expected, after 5 minutes of non-stop useless attacks, Elder Dragon was finally forced into an abrupt halt after his body reverted back to its mortality status. Cough. Cough. He coughed a large amount of boiling blood as he kept breathing heavily while his vision seemed distorted. I can't accept this. I refuse. He kept repeating with great difficulty as he tried his best to locate Felix through his asterisked-up vision. Losing the enhanced reaction speed made it impossible for him to get back to his previous level without such nasty consequences. To make matters worse, his Dragon Fury's boost was rapidly losing its heat. The fact that he managed to keep up his peak rage consistent for 5 minutes straight was already an achievement on its own. With those kinds of side effects piling up one after another, Elder Dragon could be said to be at the weakest point in his life. Felix was waiting just for this moment. You finally grew tired. Felix teleported in front of him with a blinding light that caused Elder Dragon to squint at him. With his distorted vision, he was seeing multiple versions of Felix in front of him. You are just a bastard human who shouldn't be worthy to even wipe my claws clean. This isn't right, this isn't fair. Elder Dragon spoke with great difficulty as blood kept rushing from his mouth. It's all right, you are experiencing the stage of denial. Felix smiled at his nasty words, I will save you the trouble of going through the remaining stages. The moment he finished speaking, Felix began growing at a rapid speed until he matched Elder Dragon's size, reaching more than hundreds of kilometers. Because he had absorbed all the force from the past 5 minutes of beatdown, his body became brighter than the sun itself, making it impossible for the viewers to even see his skin. Before they could react, Felix manifested a gigantic crystallized white sword and held its hilt. The crystallized sword reflected the light coming out of Felix, turning it into a sword of angels used to deliver eternal judgment upon the sinners. Felix wasn't done yet as he covered the sharp side of the sword with massive red cubes that were marked to target only the scales. Then, Felix lifted the sword up high with one hand, touching the ceiling of the sky. He looked at Elder Dragon with an emotionless expression and uttered, once more, pride has doomed another great dragon. Felix couldn't forget Domino, who had a bright future ahead of him. He even considered befriending him as he liked his personality. Alas, when he was faced with defeat, his pride got the best of him and he was turned into an insufferable being incapable of accepting his loss. All of this was because of the dragon's inner pride. Here he was, punishing another dragon due to the same problem. Without waiting for a response, Felix swung the sword in a single motion at the unmoving Elder Dragon, who seemed to have been stuck in the denial stage. He just kept murmuring that he couldn't let his saga end at the hands of a human over and over again, even when the sword had already touched his forehead. Slice! The red destruction cube coating erased the annoying scales, allowing the sword a smooth journey from Elder Dragon's head to the bottom of his abdomen. The slice happened so fast, the viewers barely blinked and Felix had already retracted the bloody sword. It can't end like this. It can't. It. Elder Dragon went quiet only after his mouth and throat began separating from the very center like the rest of his body. Whoosh! Whoosh! Under the stunned eyes of the viewers, Elder Dragon's separated halves fell into the ground in a seemingly slow motion. Blood, flesh, organs, bones, and other bodily fluids were seen disengaging from his body midair, creating an unforgivable scene for everyone. No one spoke or breathed out loud as their eyes remained affixed on the falling corpse of their leader, their founder, and their previous strongest and most respectful figure in their world. It was like the entire universe was giving him a moment of silence to pay respect even when there was nothing about the battle to be respected. Thud! Thud! With two loud thunderous bangs, Elder Dragon's separated corpse settled on hundreds of kilometers of surface area, appearing like the corpse of a slain god. If this wasn't happening in the UVR, everyone knew that Elder Dragon's corpse would be worshipped by new civilizations after eons passed. Alas, before this thought could take root in their minds, everyone took a deep cold breath at the sight of Elder Dragon's red flesh turning darker while shrinking in size like it was being eaten by worms. Although his size was that of hundreds of kilometers, it barely took a few seconds before only Elder Dragon's black and sickening bones were left behind. Your child sure knows no mercy to those who wronged him. Aspidic alone spoke with a faint wry smile as he knew that Felix had completely wiped out Elder Dragon from existence. Queen AI might not have announced it out loud, but the primogenitors knew immediately that Elder Dragon's soul was killed by true poison before his body. When it came to souls, almost all mortals had the same standard defenses against attacks. Elder Dragon was no different, as his soul was not special in this department. As for the source of the true poison, most viewers were blinded by the light, but the primogenitors saw that Felix's sword was filled with liquid true poison. Congratulations to Landlord for his victory after eliminating Elder Dragon. Berserth. Under this deafening silence, Queen AI released this announcement 3 times. After Sir Vixior failed to do his job, no one could blame him. He was just as stunned as everyone else at the notion that the SG Alliance had lost one of its last founding members forever. How they did know exactly. At the same time as the announcement, Aoenai sent an automatic message to every single member of the alliance. The Grand Supreme Elder Dragon Berserth has passed away. It was a short and emotionless message. But it brought out emotions from everyone, as whether one hated or loved. Elder Dragon, no one thought that there would be a day when he go to the other side. I might have taken his title and humiliated him in a battle, but his presence in everyone's heart is just too deep. Felix thought to himself the moment he got teleported back to the stadium and was met with utter silence instead of cheers over doing the impossible and dethroning Elder Dragon. But this silence didn't last for long, as Felix had an obsessed fan base that cared literally about nothing but him. Leon Lord. Clap. 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 The cheers and chants were faint and spread out due to the low numbers of his fans, but since everyone else was as quiet as mice, they took over the stadium rapidly. This caused the remaining spectators to start breaking out of their daze one by one. Some joined Felix's fans in their cheers, while the majority had absolutely no clue how to react properly to Elder Dragon's death. Even the dragons' reaction seemed conflicted, as most of them felt that Elder Dragon's death shouldn't have happened, but at the same time, they couldn't really curse out Felix or blame him. After all, they respected strength above anything else, and they believed that it was within Felix's own right to kill his enemy in a 1vs1 battle. He really did it. Clan head Kirsoon murmured with an absent-minded expression. Clan head Zygos, Azastirth, and Bemid all glanced at him with the same look. They wanted Felix to kill Elder Dragon for real, as it would finally open up his leadership position for competition again after millions of years of his dictatorship. L1 T-Lagoon witnessed the first publication of this chapter on N0VELB1N. Now that it happened, it felt too surreal for them. He might not have the best character out there, but he was one of the greatest alliance leaders we ever knew. Emperor Local sighed as he glanced at Elder Dragon's empty chair. I will kinda miss him. I still don't know what caused those two to have such bad blood between them. Queen Alfreda shook her head. Maybe the result would have been different otherwise. Doubtful. Hai Chiatain Lakaka remarked, Elder Dragon will never accept his defeat and losing his Grand Supreme title. This means they will keep going at each other's throat every decade until King Maxwell finally gives in and kill him once and for all. Bad blood or not, there is only one Grand Supreme title, and clearly none of them are going to give up on it. This was the logical side of the whole situation, and the 10 rulers all could see it happening in real life. But most viewers didn't look this far. All they knew was that the Alliance's founding father was killed for real when he had the possibility of revival. This caused most of them to end up flipping off on Felix and actually start to badmouth him or boo him, which made the entire atmosphere change for the worst. Felix already anticipated public outrage and didn't seem to care that much about it. He merely waved his hand at his fans with a faint smile, as he always do, for their continuous support throughout his long journey. Then, he turned his back and teleported outside of the stadium one last time, knowing that from today onward, he was never going to step foot on this platform again. Ladies and gentlemen, there is going to be a ceremony for the title's bestowment in 3 days. You are all free to attend and celebrate this historical moment in our lives. Sir Victoire finally got his sh*t together and tried to control the atmosphere after seeing Felix's departure. Unfortunately, emotions were running high and no one really listened to him. Felix's fans were extremely upset that their idol's last game was turned into this by other viewers. They weren't able to even celebrate the fact that he had broken Elder Dragon's win streak record and even set a new unbreakable one of having more than 29 continuous wins. The 10 challenges were considered wins even if they were forfeited, which meant Felix's haters had nowhere to hold him from this win streak ever again. Alas, Felix's fans weren't given even the chance to brag, as Elder Dragon's death was just too of a serious matter that affected everyone. Well, I guess you guys have won the race. Erebus gave a slow clap to Felix's masters. What's your next move now? Take another human under your wing and restart the climb. Cherif scoffed. He was clearly still irritated by how the battle turned out to be. Nope, we are retiring. Thor shrugged. Jurmai and I took part in this to teach those Darkins rats a lesson. Now that they have been kicked out of the council and games altogether, there is no point anymore. I took part for the sake of Manitial monoliths. Lady Sphinx added, I have already taken all the pieces that you had. In a sense, all of Felix's masters had their goals achieved from the platform too, which really was considered a happy ending for everyone involved. So, I guess we won't be seeing much of you anymore in the games, a shame. Siren sighed in disappointment. As much as she disliked Felix defeating her champions non-stop, she still preferred having him in the games since it was more entertaining to bet with 3 primogenitors at once. While Felix's masters had already fulfilled their desires from the platform and the games, the rest of the primogenitors were doing all of this just for entertainment purposes. Now that Felix had reached the end of the road in the most spectacular manner, every one of them knew that it really wasn't going to be the same without him or his masters. Obviously, there were still racial games and Felix could potentially join the Void Nation team or the human team. But honestly, Felix wasn't really needed in both teams as his Void Nation was already strong enough to dominate even the dragons in racial games. Meanwhile, his human race team could be led by Noah and Olivia after they exit the elemental galaxy. Just Noah alone was capable of soloing the entire racial games platform if the Void Nation team wasn't considered. So, unbeknownst to the raging viewers, this was the last time they were ever going to see Felix in a game again. One could only wonder if their reaction would be the same if they knew this. It's a good thing we didn't waste our time on Elder Dragon, Saurus said as he closed the stream for the battle. I expected the battle to go on that brat's side, but I still didn't think he will be this dominant. Wendigo shook his head. He even lost after becoming a temporary deity. Saurus frowned. That concept destruction ability is capable of acting as the perfect barrier against anything he marked, which will make it difficult even for us to kill him with elemental abilities or spiritual pressure. The ability to destroy concepts entailed that even the invisible spiritual pressure could not bypass the destructiveness of the element. This meant the concept destruction trident could be considered as the perfect shield against almost anything. It literally took offense as the best method of defense to a whole different level. Elder Dragon would have realized that his spiritual pressure was also useless if it was enhanced with his reaction speed during his fake breakthrough. The only reason his spiritual pressure remained the same was that it was heavily connected with his true self as a whole. If Elder Dragon truly achieved a deity level in a proper manner and his entire body was transformed permanently, then, his spiritual pressure would have been improved to match his new status in the universe. Using potions and such to cross the 1 million line wasn't it? If we want to continue with our plan, you can expect that there will be some resistance if you didn't manage to ambush him before he could react. Saurus said with a deep frown. Indeed, you must kill him before he uses this ability to defend himself. Wendigo said as he eyed his partner Mananangle. You guys are worrying too much. Mananangle said calmly, even if he had his masters near him, I will still be fast enough to kill him before he or they can do anything. Nothing is faster than internal blood impulsion. We know, but it's best to still be cautious. This is going to be our last attempt at his life and we are paying our freedom for its sake. Wendigo narrowed his eyes, it must work. Don't forget, we are also owing Illusion Primogenitor a huge favor over his additional help. I can't imagine what that unpredictable trickster will ask from us later on. Saurus said with a slight shiver coursing down his spine after recalling their meeting with the Illusion Primogenitor that happened 4 months ago. At AX. 4 months earlier. The Darkins could be seen stepping into a living room that greeted them with a warm and inviting atmosphere. It exuded both comfort and sophistication. The walls were a soothing shade of pale blue, complemented by subtle metallic accents that added a futuristic touch to the decor. They walked towards a plush, oversized sofa that seemed to beckon them to sink into its cushions. In one corner of the room, a sleek, chrome fireplace crackled with an artificial flame that danced and flickered like the real thing. The heat radiating from the fireplace was just enough to create a cozy ambience without making the room too stuffy. Where is he? Saurus asked as he sat with his peers on the cushions. Who can? Before Wendigo could finish his sentence, he felt a slight touch on his rear, forcing him to jump up instantly. His peers reacted the same as they were also touched. When they looked at the cushions, they had an irritated expression clouding their faces at the sight of two beautiful star-like mischievous eyes and pale slender feminine hands emerging from the cushions. "Your tushies are still as perky as ever." A soothing giggle echoed in the room, making the three primogenitors' eyelids twitch in annoyance. "And you are still as bothersome as ever." Wendigo called with an irked tone, "Loki." 1267 How deeply was he involved? Abruptly, a breathtaking woman emerged from the cushion and sat on it with one leg crossed above the other. 1. Her hair was an enchanting shade of deep blue, shimmering like the ocean on a sunny day. It cascaded down her back. Her eyes were a bright, piercing green that seemed to sparkle with an inner light, and her delicate features were framed by a few strands of hair that fell gracefully around her face. Her skin was smooth and flawless, with a hint of natural blush on her cheeks that gave her a youthful glow. Her slender figure was accentuated by a form-fitting dress that hugged her curves in all the right places, and she moved with a grace and poise that suggested both confidence and elegance. Her overall appearance was nothing short of breathtaking, with an otherworldly beauty that left anyone who saw her spellbound. "We are here for serious business, so let's put the pranks aside, Loki," Saurus said with a stern tone, not affected in the slightest by her enchanting beauty. "I know, you want information about Lord Cows." Loki smiled at them. "You were spying on us? Haven't we told you to stop doing that?" Wendigo showed a displeased expression. "Ah, sorry but no can do, your current conflict with the Asgardians is the most entertaining story right now." Loki giggled while covering his mouth, making the Darkin's eyelids twitch in irritation. Unfortunately, they knew that the moment Loki's found something entertaining, nothing would make him drop it. "Forget it, you creep. What can you tell us about Lord Cows? Is he really afraid of stepping into the Paragon of Sin's area of slumber?" Saurus inquired with a solemn tone. I don't know about the term afraid, but he is definitely avoiding the Void Realm's territory of what is beyond the Great Void," Loki replied while rubbing his smooth fair chin, seemingly used to scratching a beard. His mannerism was that of a man through and through, but his beautiful female appearance would really trip anyone off. The Darkins never asked him about his current appearance since they knew that he was into shape-shifting and always had a new appearance once in a while. In fact, no one had ever seen his real appearance before besides Lady Sphinx, as she was the only one capable of seeing through his perfect illusions with her truth vision. "How confident are you?" Mananangel inquired. 90%. Loki shrugged his shoulders. "Lord Koas is an old good pal of mine, but he is really too secretive even for me. All I know is that I heard a rumor of him having a fallout with the Paragon of Sins back in the days when she was still awake. So, it's fair to assume that he wants to stay away from her." "A fallout? That's new." Wendigo and his peers looked at each other with startled expressions. Just like the rest of the primogenitors, they assumed that Lord Koa's relationship with the Paragon of Sins must be somewhat unfriendly due to the mess she created in his peaceful realm, but they didn't think it would be due to fallout. "That's all I know, whether he will hunt you down or not, that's for you to find out," Loki said. Mananangel and his peers looked at each with solemn expressions and took their conversation on a telepathic level. "What do you think? Should we go for it? I think 90% is high enough to take the risk. I honestly would have done it for much lower." It seemed like the Darkins were convinced to commit to their plan, as 90% was more than enough for them to take such a risk if it meant finally getting rid of Felix once and for all. "If we did this, it means we won't be able to return back to our side ever." Saurus narrowed his eyes. "It doesn't really matter that much for any of us," Wendigo said coldly. "We have been kicked out of the Primogenitors' Council and most of our descendants have been massacred while the rest became refugees. There is nothing to come back to in the first place. The fact that Felix was solely responsible for all of this made it easier for them to make the decision. Well, I have heard that the Alliance is making plans to explore and expand on what is beyond the Great Void. Saurus said, if everything went smoothly, the UVR's signal will cover that territory and we will be able to access it again. So, we really won't be losing much. You're right. The two main issues with their plan were Lord Cow's and the fact that they would be losing the UVR's connection. Now that it looked like both of them were somewhat handled, there wasn't much of a downside. Just to be safe, I suggest both of you go ahead of me and let me handle the assassination alone. Manananggal suggested calmly, Lord Cow's must be having his eyes on that brat. I might kill him in time, but I am not certain I will be able to make out alive. While Manananggal could afford to lose his clones, those two could be screwed big time if they angered Lord Cow's and got caught by him. So, it was best for them to travel to the other side before the assassination attempt and leave it for their partner. I want to rip that little F***er with my own hands. Saurus said coldly, but, you have a point. I am glad you have made up your minds. Loki smiled widely, this is going to be fun. You really are a bastard. Wendigo and his peers got vexed after realizing that Loki was listening to their telepathic conversation. They knew that he had the means of doing this, but they didn't think that he would be insolent enough to eavesdrop in front of their faces. I already told you that I am quite invested in this story. Loki acted upset, it's your own fault for not including me willingly. Knowing that there was no escaping from Loki's forceful inclusion, the Darkins could only sigh in defeat and leave him be. Plus, I can even help you out. Loki showed a mischievous smile as he manifested a small blood drop in a glass vial before them. Is this? Manananggal raised an eyebrow in surprise. Yep. Loki sent the blood drop towards them and said, I am not giving it for free, of course. What do you want? Saurus asked with a serious tone. This might be just a normal blood drop in the eyes of other people, but before the Darkins? It was the last key in their assassination plan. Since you will be immigrating to the other side, I want you to help spread out the UVR's signal in the demon's territory. Loki requested, the Alliance won't have problems with the other races, but the demons will most definitely reject their wooing attempt. May I ask why? Manananggal spoke with a composed tone, this has nothing to do with the deal as we accept it, but I am really curious, why are you trying so hard to put the entire universe under your illusion domain? If anyone were to hear this, they would have felt chills course on their spine at the implication of his statement. It wouldn't take a genius to realize that the illusion primogenitor Loki had a massive connection to the UVR's existence as a whole. But how deeply involved was he? It was clear that only primogenitors seemed to have this kind of crucial information. I am just running my own experiment. Loki merely smiled and didn't add any further. The Darkins glanced at each other and dropped the matter at once, knowing that Loki was really weird and his motives were always incomprehensible. Since he couldn't bring harm to them with his experiment, they really didn't give a sh*t about what he do with the others. So, they thanked him for his help and left his place with the blood drop. After the room was emptied, Loki waved his hand casually and 4 holograms emerged in front of him. What's shocking was that those holograms were showing the Darkins' point of view in addition to Felix's in real time. It was like he hacked into their brains and was capable of seeing exactly the same view without raising a single alarm in their minds. He manifested a cocktail with a straw and spectated the holograms with a look of anticipation. I have been following your story ever since your Unigen girlfriend joined my world. Please do not disappoint me and end your story now. It will be a long while before the main entertaining event begins. Loki wished as he watched Felix's screen place with the blood drop. After the room was emptied, Loki waved his hand casually and 4 holograms emerged in front of him. What's shocking was that those holograms were showing the Darkins' point of view in addition to Felix's in real time. It was like he hacked into their brains and was capable of seeing exactly the same view without raising a single alarm in their minds. He manifested a cocktail with a straw and spectated the holograms with a look of anticipation. I have been following your story ever since your Unigen girlfriend joined my world. Please do not disappoint me and end your story now. It will be a long while before the main entertaining event begins. Loki wished as he watched Felix's screen that was showing him training in his UVR's room. It will be really disappointing if my only source of entertainment ends preemptively, really disappointing. 1268. It's time to put you to rest. Null, back to the present. Did you manage to track him yet? Soros inquired. No, he is still constantly on light speed mode. Mananangal informed as he eyed a spinning blood drop on his palm. Tisk, he is bound to stop eventually. Wendigo clicked his tongue in irritation. Ever since they had left their meeting with Loki, they kept attempting to use the blood drop to track down Felix's location. It was more than possible since the blood drop was 100% the exact copy of Felix's blood. If the Darkins asked Queen AI or anyone to give them this drop of blood, they would have been denied thoroughly since they had no permission from the owner. But, Loki was clearly outside of the system's control and could do whatever he wanted with all the data in the UVR. In fact, he could even give them the exact location of Felix by tracking his AP bracelet. But, he obviously found no fun in this. Nevertheless, with Mananangal's perfect control over blood, he was the only one capable of tracking locations by a mere blood drop even on a universal scale. Unfortunately for them, Felix almost never bothered to stop his spaceship from leaving the lightspeed mode since he spent most of his time in the UVR. Though, the times when he exited the UVR to integrate with his bloodline kept helping the Darkins narrow his area. Right now, they had already located that he was in the Milky Way galaxy and to be precise in his Federation's large territory. Just be patient, we are getting nearer and nearer. Mananangal said with narrowed eyes. By the way, I have concluded the deal with Lord Dune. He said he will open a private wormhole leading straight to the other side and keep it open for us. Soros shared. Good, we will depart the moment it's done. Mananangal nodded. Naturally, Mananangal was going with them too as he knew that Lord Koaz would definitely hunt down all of his clones after the deed. Since he only needed one clone for the assassination and he was linked with it through consciousness, they could supervise the assassination from the safety of the other side. It might seem cowardly, but when someone reached their level of wisdom, there was no such thing as cowardly actions or honorable actions, just actions with consequences. Nulli 3 days later. On the day of the Grand Supreme Ceremony, the Mariana capital city's streets were alive with anticipation as the sun rose. Days of anticipation led to this gracious moment, when the city's residents lined the streets in their finest attire, waving flags and banners in the air. While the majority were humans, there were many people from other races also participating in this historical day. The inaugural upload of this chapter took place via N0V3LB1N. The city was vast but still, all of its streets were crowded to the brim with excited and feverish citizens. Houses and buildings were decorated with large pictures of Felix in different poses and attires throughout his entire journey on the platform. Even the sky wasn't left at peace as there were many slow-flying airships, pulling humongous holographic screens, showing Felix's most viral and extraordinary videos from his games. Such as the moment when he surfed above a rushing magma river inside an erupting volcano. Everyone declared that he was a dead man, yet he proved them wrong and escaped to safety while also securing the win. Or the epic moment where he slayed the Kraken, an entire alliance of more than 30 players got absolutely owned by the Kraken. When everyone thought that this monster was unkillable, Felix proved to them again that the impossible wasn't in his dictionary. The current highlight was showing exactly the moment when Felix took off into the thunderstorm without wings. Lightning flashed and thunder roared in the background as he began free-diving towards the monstrous Kraken while spinning around himself to create more powerful momentum on the bulky end of his tail. Under the trillions of people right now in the city with their heads lifted into the sky, Felix went through Kraken and emerged from the other side bloody, tired, and pained, but victorious. Nully clap. 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 I was there, sob, I was there. Man. This hurts bad. I still can't believe our Lord is retiring, sniffle, is this really it? We only got less than 20 games from him. Most citizens watching those highlights couldn't help but feel emotional as to whether they were there when those epic scenes happened or not, they still wished collectively for more. Alas, Felix had reached the end of the road for real, there was nothing more for the games to offer him as he literally almost owned the entire alliance now. He was the Grand Supreme, the Void Nation King, and the humans' recognized leader, he had the backing of Queen Allura, Queen Alfreda, and even potentially King Mahit. This meant that he had 5 votes in the bag in almost any decision made by the 10 rulers. His authority could be said to even surpass Elder Dragon as the friends and allies he made on his arduous path backed him up. Right now, Felix could be seen standing on the balcony ledge of his newly built majestic palace. The majestic palace, with its soaring spires reaching high into the sky, stood in the middle of the city. Although Felix wasn't considering himself to be royalty or even interested in creating a royal family, his people made him insignia with his family's name, it was displayed on tapestries and banners that were hung across the entire palace. They really are going all out for you. Asna said with a mesmerizing smile as she stood next to him and locked her arms with him. I would have gone for something subtle, but I really had no say in this. Felix smiled wryly as he recalled his senior sister Allura scolding him for wanting the ceremony to be low-key. In her exact words, she said that the Grand Supreme ceremony affected the entire alliance's population as a whole since it marked the birth of a new leader, a new alliance, and a new era. It would be disrespectful to make a lackluster ceremony. Obviously, Elder Dragon's death wasn't forgotten so soon as many people decided to boycott attending or watching the ceremony's stream. The public outrage had yet to be squelched and had gotten even worse when Elder Dragon's funeral finished 2 days ago. Fortunately, the humans didn't give a sh*t about Elder Dragon's death when their king was the one replacing him. So, even when many people boycotted the ceremony, its liveness wasn't affected in the slightest. King Maxwell, it's time. Zazia informed after entering the room. I will be there soon. Felix nodded at her before looking at the sky with a tint of sadness, to be precise, he was looking at his in-game name that was written in clouds. We had a great run, but, it's time to put you to rest my old friend. With a forced smile, Felix turned around and walked towards the door with Asna holding his arm. As the door was closing behind him, a glimpse of the name appeared from the balcony. Nulbunpaid Landlord. 1269 Grand Supreme Ceremony. Ka thump. As the giant well-designed royal gate was pushed wide open by 2 guards, Felix and his madam stepped forth inside the throne chamber with arms locked together and nonchalant expressions. The majesty of the royal throne chamber was readily apparent. The space was large and had tall marble pillars supporting its high ceilings. The walls were covered with beautiful tapestries that showed historical and triumphant episodes throughout his entire journey. Every step he took on the polished marble floor reverberated throughout the space. The throne itself was situated at the far end of the space, elevated on a dais. It was a massive building made of dazzling gold and set with priceless stones. Felix's emblem was shown on the throne's back, while the seat was upholstered in the richest crimson velvet. Even with grandeur and magnificence, it dimmed out the instant king and his queen showed their presence before the attending guests. The 10 rulers were all here, even King Mahit for some reason. The Void Nation's councilmen were also situated behind the throne with solemn expressions, appearing like royal guardians. Zazia, the Maganda chief, Princess Bird Elisa, and the rest of the anti-royalty alliance AUG members were seen standing at the side of the throne chamber even higher in position than the inner circle leaders. Lara, Lobna, Naima, Ishtar, and the rest of the Witch Academy teachers were also attending in their finest dresses, appearing as glamorous as possible. Winfried, Hameru, the Fang, and the rest of the Void mercenary branch leaders were seen gazing at Felix and his goddess girlfriend with complex looks. In fact, almost everyone attending this ceremony seemed to have mixed emotions at the sight of Felix getting nearer and nearer to the throne. This really feels surreal. Naima spoke telepathically with her friends, not daring to even breathe out loud in the presence of Felix and Ansa. They might not mean it, but both of them were releasing an authoritative pressure like two perfect deities born from the same mold and for each other. It sure is. Who would have thought that hooligan in our academy will reach this height in less than 2 decades? Ishtar smiled wryly. I barely managed to master 2 rank 3 potions in the same time frame. Felix. Princess Bertalisa bit her lips tightly as Felix walked past her and gave her a faint gentle smile before continuing on his path. 2 decades was enough time for her to mature and grow into a fine beautiful woman who would make any man gift her a ring at the slightest opening. That faint smile from Felix made her realize that he still saw her as that little annoying child who can't articulate her emotions in an honest way. You will be all right. Manda Chief smiled bitterly as he placed his hand on top of his daughter's head and lowered it. He knew more than anyone that his daughter have loved and wanted Felix for more than 2 decades even when he stopped interacting with her. Alas, just the sight of Asna alone was enough to completely shatter any competition for Felix's heart. He didn't even need to do anything for other women to realize that they couldn't amount to Anna in beauty, confidence, and natural goddess-like demeanor. Since this ceremony was being streamed live, billions of dreamy women's hearts were shattered just like Princess Bird's at the sight of this perfect couple. Only Selfie resisted Asna's overpowering traits and was still trying her best to fight for a place in Felix's heart even when he already rejected her. Your Majesty! Thud. 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 The moment Felix reached the throne, Arthur, the Ruiner, Miriam, Mammon, Enir, and Candace all took a knee simultaneously with the most respectful expression. This sight alone had made many inner circle leaders frown a little as it made them understand that Felix had such a strong grip on his overpowering Void Nation. Whether they liked to admit it or not, having Felix as the new Grand Supreme made them honestly nervous for their future. Who could blame them? He was even more overpowered and scarier than Elder Dragon. Arise! The councilmen stood back up and returned to their positions after the order. Felix held Asna's hand gently and helped her sit first on her own dignified chair. Only then did he sit down and looked at everyone with a smile that exuded utmost confidence and authority. I appreciate everyone accepting my invitation to the ceremony. I am truly honored to be in presence of friends, colleagues, and family, Felix said with a grateful tone. We are the ones honored by the invitation. Maganda Chief smiled while the others nodded in approval. Seeing that everyone was ready, Felix stood up again with a serious expression and looked directly into the transparent camera in front of him. As the new Grand Supreme, he was dutied to make a speech that addressed the entire alliance as a whole since he was considered the 11th member of the 10 rulers. My dear people, I am humbled and grateful for the trust you have placed in me as I stand before you today as your new Grand Supreme. I have fought tooth and nail for this position as I always knew deep down that I can do wonderful things to make our lives easier and worth living. I am very aware of the obstacles the Alliance has faced in the past and Elder Dragon's extraordinary role in overcoming them. I am not here to badmouth his legacy or hard work to create those peaceful times. I am standing before you here for one single reason: I have a vision of progress, prosperity, and peace for our alliance. Felix paused as he narrowed his eyes, making everyone's hearts skip a beat the moment they stared directly into his eyes. So, my first task as the Grand Supreme is to explore what lies beyond the Great Void. The moment this statement left his mouth, almost everyone was left stunned as this was the first time they hear about this. Only the inner circle leaders were knowledgeable about the Alliance's exploration plans and they were under contracts to keep such intel to themselves. Looks like the 10 rulers want to use this platform to gauge their citizens' reaction. King Tresnor thought to himself. He understood that Felix had no permission to make such an announcement alone even if he was the Grand Supreme. This meant a vote was carried in the 10 rulers' assembly to make the news public in the ceremony. As expected, this kind of news wasn't easy to digest for everyone as the majority didn't even bother to learn about the other side of the universe. Still, the zealous citizens of the Alliance all broke into massive waves of feverishly excited cheers, whether in the stream chats or in the streets. I can't believe they are giving it another attempt. I heard that High Chieftain Lakaka almost got lost in the Great Void. This is massive news. I heard rumors that more than 40% of the universe is cut off from us by the Great Void. Dear God, I can't even fathom what kind of races and life forms exists on the other side. Am I the only one who thinks this is a very bad idea? Who knows if the other side is filled with monsters and races much stronger than us combined? Won't be inviting trouble. Trouble? How can you even say that with a straight face? The SG Alliance is the most powerful entity in the universe and nothing can stop us if we decide to conquer anyone. There were some mixed opinions here and there of very concerned citizens, but the majority were on a high dosage of excitement about the future. They understood that the other side must be filled with either untouched resources and treasures or new races. In both scenarios, the Alliance would benefit greatly from the exploration, as even if those races owed such said resources, it wasn't hard to get them to join the Alliance and share them. If they rejected their peace offering? It was even better, as it had been a while since the Alliance went to war against outsiders. B1N Realm was the platform where this chapter was initially revealed on N0v3L.B1N. I know that some of you must be feeling worried and troubled about the unknown. Felix faced the camera again with an aura that exuded an overbearing amount of confidence and pride. Then, he uttered a statement that made everyone feel goosebumps, "For I'm the Grand Supreme, and as long as I live, the Alliance will remain standing tall and upright. You have my word." Creator's thoughts. With that we conclude the 15th-volume, The Grand Supreme. This volume can be considered as the end of the game's arcs in the novel, as from now onward, the plot will keep progressing until the novel's conclusion. I know that the novel's name is Supremacy Games, but it is still a sci-fi cultivation novel at heart. I hope you have enjoyed this volume and all the games that I have written before it, as from now onward, it's going to get real heated. Thank you for your continuous support. Occasionally missing content, please report errors in time. 1270 His first decision as the Grand Supreme. A few days after the ceremony concluded, Felix could be seen sitting on the highest platform in the 10 Rulers' Assembly. All of his peers were there but King Mahit. The final tests of the device have been completed in the UVR. Now, we just need to do a live trial with one exploration squad, Empress Emily shared. That's good to hear. Queen Alfreda nodded. When will we carry on the test? Emperor Local inquired. I suggest in 2 months. Queen Allura said, it's enough time to prepare for the test as well as give a proper period for everyone to attend the live test. Everyone was in favor of her suggestion as it made the most sense. For the first trial squad, I believe the team should have space worms and void citizens aboard in case we failed. Minister Aquarius suggested as he eyed Felix. What do you think, King Maxwell? Makes sense, Felix approved, knowing that a combination of those two races would make crossing the Great Void easier in case the squad got lost in the middle. This is all in today's meeting, have a nice day. Seeing that everyone was on the same page, Queen Alfreda attempted to excuse herself as she was clearly busy with other matters related to her elvish realms. Wait. Felix stopped her with a polite tone. Is there something else? Emperor Local asked in intrigue. Felix ignored him and kept tapping his finger on the armchair as he looked underneath him, where millions of desperate people were trying their best to climb the staircase and reach them for a mere wish. After a few seconds of awkward silence, Felix said with a flat tone, I want to abolish this stairway to heaven. It shouldn't be a thing in the first place. Ever since Felix stepped into the 10 Rulers' Assembly, he was always irked at the notion that there were millions of desperate people across the entire alliance being left with no other choice but to climb those impossible stairs for the sake of fixing their broken lives. Sure, there were many people giving this heinous system a try for the fun of it, but the majority really had some serious unsolvable problems that could get wiped out with a mere wave of a hand with one of the 10 rulers' involvement. Is it bugging you? Emperor Local frowned. I think it should stay, as we are giving our citizens a chance to fix their lives as long as they are willing to show their absolute determination in doing so. The staircase is the best way to filter the ones that truly are desperate for our help and the ones merely seeking freebies from us. Answer me this then. Felix looked at him calmly and asked, when was the last time someone reached the assembly and you fulfilled his wish? Emperor Local wasn't able to answer the question as he knew that it was a very, very, long time ago. Unfortunately for him, Empress Emily didn't care about how it would look like as she gave Felix the exact date with even seconds included. More than 2,000 years ago. Felix stressed calmly, possibly 99% of all the people that tried to waste their time on this Hail Mary attempt must have already dropped dead. The number should be in the tens of billions. Yet, here you are telling me that this system is necessary when it merely saved one person from tens of billions in more than 2 millennials. I don't know if you are lying to yourself or you just enjoy the ego boost from seeing millions of desperate people crawling towards you for a second of your time. This. Emperor Local's cheek turned somewhat red in shame and embarrassment as he had nothing to defend himself. In truth, his ego wasn't involved in the slightest as he honestly just didn't care about those people. In his eyes, his time was too precious to be wasted on even his own empire's administration matters. He was purely passionate about forging the best artifacts and this made him view the world with his eyes closed. I know that this system isn't really working, but I am certain that abolishing it will cause us more backlash than leaving it as it is. Queen Alfreda mentioned. She is right. Minister Aquarius shook his head, it's been here for a very long time, and as much as it wasn't really efficient in helping people, at least it gives them hope. Plus, there are many citizens' jobs rely on it. Elder, it's not giving them hope, but a false one. If it was the only thing we can offer, it might not be a bad thing, but, I just feel we can do much more than this. Felix snickered, as for the citizens' jobs? I have seen them firsthand. They are just a bunch of scammers prying on people's desperation. Also, I am not planning to abolish it and leave those people with nothing. I think investing at least 0.5% of the Alliance's streaming revenue each year in a non-profit department will be much better than this useless staircase. Felix wasn't really suggesting anything new or mind-blowing, his solution was simple and easy to implement as with Queen AI's involvement and some resources from the Alliance, it wasn't hard to filter people with genuine unsolvable problems from irresponsible idiots. There were already many non-profit organizations across the universe, but there wasn't a single one that was related to the Alliance's name, which was just wrong on so many levels. Felix wasn't obviously talking about donating money, clothes, or such, but actually helping people with their serious problems to send them back to society without needing to rely on anyone ever again. I honestly don't care if you abolish it or donate money, I don't have time for this. Just consider me abstaining my vote. High Chieftain Lakaka said nonchalantly before departing from the meeting. Likewise. Empress Scarlet excused herself too with a gentle smile. Both of their races never used this staircase as one had a united front and the other had all of its people rich to the core as it was impossible for space worms to not get a job. The same applied to the witches, dwarves, droids, and high elves, only the less fortunate races had portions of their populations struggling to get by in life. Felix felt that as a human and someone with a shitty previous life, it was his duty to at least fight for them when he had finally reached this authoritative position. Plus, his guilt of getting tens of billions of Earthlings killed was also playing a part in this. Anyone else cool with this? Felix looked at the others as he asked. You have my support. Queen Allura was the first to back him up with her vote. Queen Alfreda supported him as well. I guess it's done then. Felix smiled as he requested Queen AI's attendance, not bothering to waste his time on the others' votes. Two had abstained, King Mahit wasn't even involved, and the dragons had yet to crown a new leader to represent them. With Felix possessing 2 votes and receiving the support of both queens, it meant he had 4 votes, which was the majority even if Empress Emily, Emperor Local, and Minister Aquarius voted against it. Queen, please abolish the Stairways to Heaven system and make an alliances-wide announcement about it. Felix requested. Are you sure? Felix gave one last look at the seemingly infinite stairways and the millions of struggling people that looked like ants, then, he confirmed it with a firm tone, most definitely. A moment later, Felix and the others watched the stairways, breaking into light particles from the top into the bottom. This sight froze all the climbers in their position as their brains couldn't process the notion that this eternal staircase was disappearing before them. Before they could wake up from the daze, they found themselves teleport back to their homes or the streets against their will. The first thing they heard after opening their eyes was, "The stairways to heavens has been abolished under the order of the 10 rulers." A universal notification that everyone received either straight in their minds or on their bracelets' screens. Without a shred of doubt, every single person knew immediately that this was Felix's doing. He merely got into office for 3 days and has already abolished one of the oldest traditions in the Alliance, Tisk, talk about power play. The debut release of this chapter happened at N0V3L_B1N. What the hell? Those almighty bastards already never bothered to help us with anything. Now, they even took the one thing that gave us hope. Honestly, this is for the best. I have spent more than 5 years holed up in the UVR to climb the staircase and receive a wish. In the end, I found out that I barely climbed 20% of the distance. While there were mixed views about this decision in the network, the majority felt that it was a bad one. In their eyes, even if the stairways were a scam, at least they had something. It was the perfect case of having a shitty option was better than none. It was the perfect case of having a shitty option was better than none. However, all of those negative remarks and opinions went completely radio silent after another notification resounded across the entire Alliance. SG Alliance Red Cross Department has been established. 0.5% of all game streaming revenue will be dedicated to helping the less fortunate. There will be more details available on the website in the next couple of days. 1271 Truth in Lies, Lies in Truth? Who to believe? As the decision was made, Felix left the responsible departments to finalize the rest. 1. The decision was approved by a massive majority of the citizens, making almost everyone keep stalking the SG Alliance's website for more details. As a side bonus, many upset people about Elder Dragon's death seemed to have laid out their protest torches against Felix. They realized that it might not be so bad to have Felix as their Grand Supreme since he clearly showed that he cared about commoners, at least much better than Elder Dragon who couldn't give a sh*t about anyone's life. Felix couldn't have cared less about the public's opinion of him as he kept spending most of his time on his integration, hoping to hit 99% as soon as possible. This chapter was first shared on the N0Vel BJN platform. Since he was already at 75% before his fight with Elder Dragon, it took him 15 days more or less to reach 98%. Right now, he was pushing through the remaining 1% with great difficulty under the solemn expressions of the tenants. "Do you think death might change his attitude?" Thor inquired. "Doubtful, you know how he is." Hormungandr shook his head. "He is impulsive, has a short fuse, lacks empathy and has self-destructive behavior. I would be grateful if he just didn't cause us trouble after waking up." Lord Shiva wasn't being called unhinged for no reason, as just one of those traits was horrible to have, yet, he was collecting them like Pokémon cards. Those traits made Lord Shiva impossible to predict, which was the reason why Lady Sphinx knows traits make Lord Shiva impossible to predict, which was the reason why Lady Sphinx and the others were fully prepared to erase his wisp of consciousness the instant he harbored ill intentions toward Felix. Let's hope for the best. After a few more gruesome minutes, the pain finally went away once and for all, allowing Felix to take a breather. Without an ounce of hesitation, Felix swiftly entered his consciousness space, not bothering to even clean his sweat. "Did he get awakened?" he asked with a serious expression as he looked around him. "Yes, I can feel his presence." Lady Sphinx answered. "Good." Felix sighed in relief. He knew that it was unlikely that Lord Shiva's soul would be as strong as Elder Kraken's. Still, he was always worried that he might not get awakened and that he would be required to seek out another bloodline bottle from King Mahit. He knew that wasn't going to end on a peaceful note. "What a lovely gathering you have here." Lord Shiva didn't make them wait for long as he took form near the circular table, where everyone was sitting. Felix had already seen Lord Shiva's imposing form through his master's memories, but he was still overwhelmed when he appeared right in front of him. He was dwarfed by Lord Shiva, who was almost 9 meters tall. He was exuding a natural aura of strength and knowledge that was both inspiring and humbling. With his matted hair cascading down his back like a river of black silk, Lord Shiva had an unusual aspect. His wild appearance was given a peaceful undertone by the flower garlands in his hair. His skin was grey in color and cracked, signifying his ties to the destruction element. His face was chiseled and stern, with a sharp jawline and high cheekbones that gave him an air of regal authority. On his forehead, the Lord was shown to have a pitch-black third eye that seemed to absorb even the smallest particle of light. It was the only one open as his other eyes seemed closed in a state of intense meditation. Bangles and bracelets graced Lord Shiva's forearms, giving his gruff appearance a hint of elegance. "It's an honor to meet you again, Lord Shiva." All of the primogenitors bowed their heads respectfully even when Lord Shiva had intentions to bring destruction upon the entire universe. "If only I could say the same, looks like I failed." Lord Shiva exhaled with a tint of disappointment while rubbing his closed-shut eyes. The primogenitors' eyelids twitched as they discerned that Lord Shiva was annoyed by their existence. Meanwhile, Felix couldn't help but frown a little in confusion. Didn't he get killed by the elemental lords? How can he not know that he failed before he died? It shouldn't come as a surprise. There is clearly more to the story than we know. Asna was just as baffled. "You were brought from the realm of death and you still have such a burning fury to end it all." Thor said with a displeased tone, "Lord, have you really just gone mad?" "Gone mad?" Lord Shiva showed a hollow smile as he decreased his size until he matched everyone, then, he took a seat with them at the table. "I am not mad, I'm just enlightened." "Enlightened?" Hormungandr narrowed his eyes. "Your actions have resulted in the erasure of more than 20% of the observable universe. Millions of galaxies were gone and everyone on it wasn't even given the chance to visit the spirit realm due to your ultimate ability. How can you say that you haven't gone mad with a straight face?" Hormungandr rarely got riled up, but this time, he really wanted to punch Lord Shiva in the face. 20%? That's indeed an unfortunate situation. Lord Shiva seemed somewhat remorseful, but, if I wasn't interrupted by those traitors, the entire universe would have been deleted and everyone would have received a fair equal ending. Traitors? 20% of the universe is gone? What the hell is he talking about? Felix's doubts kept multiplying in his mind as this conversation wasn't making any sense to him. To make it worse, he couldn't really intervene and request for them to explain the context as it was clearly a sensitive subject for everyone involved. Unbeknownst to him, even his masters were confused by the term traitors being used on the elemental lords. "Who are you calling a traitor?" Abruptly, Lord Chaos joined the discussion with his usual expressionless cosmic form. "I thought I smelled the presence of a rat." Lord Shiva's entire demeanor changed to hostile the moment he spotted Lord Chaos. The atmosphere got madly intense as those two were legit lords and they seemed to have no issues clashing with each other. This was what scared Felix as he knew that if they fought here, his consciousness would crumble immediately. "Can we take a step back and restart again? Here, smoke this and it will relax you immediately." Carbuncle attempted to bring some peace by offering both of them his favorite rolled-up joints. Both of them ignored his existence and continued staring at each other. "We had the perfect plan to teach those F***ers a lesson and ruin their game. When it was time to implement it, all of you had cold feet and turned against me." Lord Shiva sneered, "Isn't that the perfect description of a traitor? You really want to do this here?" Lord Chaos uttered as he glanced at everyone's perplexed expressions. "Do I look like I care any more about hiding the truth?" Lord Shiva scoffed, "I should have told everyone about their precious reality, at least, I wouldn't have been alone when you backstabbed me." "Lord Chaos, Lord Shiva, can you tell us what really happened back there?" Lady Sphinx requested with a cold expression. If there was one thing she hated the most, it would definitely be lied to. She had no issues if one didn't want to involve her with the truth, but just not lie about it, as she knew that lies were the absolute ban to knowledge. From her reaction, it was clear that her truth vision wasn't good enough to detect lies from the truth at that period of time. I don't know what those traitors have told you after my death, but it's best to see for yourselves, Lord Shiva warned. Just know one thing, your quest of finding your meaning in life will end after this. 1272 Truth in Lies, Lies in Truth? Who to believe? 2. This statement shocked Felix to the core. Don't even mention the primogenitors, who spent billions of years seeking their purpose of existence. Most of them even considered committing suicide due to the dullness of their lives and the lack of any meaning or substance to it. It was that bad. Are you being serious? Thor asked with a stern tone. Lord Shiva ignored his question and asked, have you ever wondered why almost all the elemental lords never showed any signs of depression even when they lived much longer than you? Or most importantly, how they never bothered to create descendants or interact with the universe in the same manner as you? Hormungandr and the others knitted their eyebrows at his questions. This wasn't the first time they wondered about those matters, as it was apparent that, always be behaving differently than the rest. In the case of depression, they believed that they possessed a much better mental fortitude than them, since there weren't any other explanations. On another note, all the elemental lords didn't have descendants, since they believed that it would be bad for the balance of the universe for more people to have their kind of powers. At least, that's what Thor and the others were being told, but now, it seemed like there was a much deeper reasoning behind all of this. Lady Sphinx was the first to figure it out. They knew about the purpose of our existence and they hid. She stated with an icy tone. Lady Sphinx wasn't easily angered, but this really had gotten on her nerves. She shared most of the important knowledge that she found on her own with everyone. She believed that sharing knowledge with others would make them return the favor if they ever found something interesting and she didn't know about it. Hiding the purpose of their existence was 100 times worse than this, as it was a subject that affected all primogenitors together. Hormungandr, Thor, Carbnucli, Fenrir, and Elder Kraken all turned simultaneously with cold, displeased expressions toward Lord Koaz. Is she right? Yes, Lord Koaz didn't bother to hide it any longer when the situation had gotten this far. How dare you? How dare you? Hormungandr and Thor roared furiously as they slammed the table, shattering it instantly. Felix swiftly took Asna and teleported away to safety as the two visible pressuring murderous auras surged akin to slumbering dragons. Masters. This was the first time Felix saw both of his masters losing their cool like this. Honestly, he was also peeved in their place even when this didn't affect him like them. After all, his masters had ended their lives because their quest to find their meaning ended up in failure. God knows how much they tried and how much time and effort they wasted on this eternal dilemma. Yet, here they were, hearing that the elemental lords already knew about the primogenitor's purpose in life way before they offed themselves. This meant their deaths were absolutely for nothing. Lord Kaus, sigh, this is really disappointing of you. Elder Kraken, Carbuncle, and Fenrir's reactions weren't as explosive as those two, but they were clearly just as unhappy about it. You will understand why we hid it. I am certain that you will do the same, Lord Koaz replied expressionlessly, seemingly unaffected by their reactions. That's not happening. Lady Sphinx said coldly, such information should be in the hands of every primogenitor, whether it was good or bad. We are not children that need to be protected. I guess she still sees me as a child. Felix's eyelids twitched at the sound of that. He might not understand the whole picture here, but he was sure that the version of the story about Lord Shiva's failed attempt to destroy the universe wasn't real. Clearly, the version that his masters knew about was also not real, which was somewhat of a consolation to him. We will see about that. Lord Koaz went silent and waited for Lord Shiva to expose everything. Lord Shiva didn't hold back in the slightest as he displayed a mirror of his own memories. Everyone glued their eyes to the mirror as one of the biggest secrets in the universe was finally going to be exposed. A long, long time ago, during the early days of the primogenitor's era. Lord Shiva could be seen sitting on a carpeted floor with his legs half crossed, exuding a relaxed and easygoing air. Lord Loki, Lord Zervan, Lord Osiris, Lord Koaz, and Lord Quetzalcoatl were seen spread out on other carpets as well. They were inside a large desert tent that was adorned with brightly colored tapestries and decorative tassels that swayed gently in the breeze. The walls were lined with intricate carpets and cushions, and a small fire burned in the center of the room, casting flickering shadows across the walls. The furnishings were simple but elegant, with low wooden tables and woven mats for seating. You really found no other place than this to set the meeting? I knew it was a bad idea to let this idiot decide. Lord Shiva scolded as he eyed Lord Loki, who had a completely different appearance. This time he took the form of a white lizardman with 3 scaled tails and a toothless mouth. I thought you guys would enjoy the fresh air. Lord Loki shrugged. Why am I being cursed? That stuck-up prick is the one leaving us waiting for hours here for him. He was clearly addressing the creation primogenitor as he was the only elemental lord missing. At this point in time, not everyone had the elemental lord title as the majority didn't manage to master their domains this early in the primogenitor's era. They were hanging with each other not because they were elemental lords, but simply because they were the first primogenitors to exist, making them consider each other as close peers. We should start without him. Lord Zervan smiled kindly. He isn't coming anytime soon. You should have said so sooner. Lord Quetzalcoatl yawned as he opened his eyes lazily. Fine. Lord Shiva fixed his posture and said with a solemn tone, I did it. You did it? Congratulations. I guess, it's about time one of you lost your virginities. Lord Loki clapped slowly with an innocent smile. Lord Shiva gave him one glare and Lord Loki stopped messing around instantly after realizing what he really meant. You actually met them. How? Lord Quetzalcoatl asked with a startled look. I just kept bugging them until they allowed me to enter their eternal kingdom. Lord Shiva answered, I honestly didn't think it would even work and I was just annoying them due to boredom. The moment Asna heard the term, eternal kingdom, she felt shivers course down her spine. As it was the home of none other than those beings. The beings who ruined her life before it even started without any explanation. You good? Felix asked as he tightened his grasp on her hand. It's nothing. Asna smiled. Let's keep watching. L1 Terrari N0v3L hosted the first appearance of this chapter at N0vel.b1n. Felix knew that something was up with her, but he put it to rest for now as he didn't want to lose focus on the Elemental Lord's discussion. So, what did you see? What did they look like? Did you ask them about us? Lord Loki fired a series of questions with a tone of utmost eagerness. I couldn't see sh*t, all of my visions were blinded, even my wisdom eye. Lord Shiva narrowed his eyes coldly, but they did speak to me all right. What did they say? Lord Osiris asked with a stoned look. They answered my question before I can ask it. I don't know if they just said this to mess with me or it was the truth, but they told me about our purpose and creator. Lord Shiva took a deep breath and then quoted with a suppressed tone, we have created you for the sole purpose of our amusement, nothing more, nothing less. 1273 Truth in Lies, Lies in Truth? Who to believe? 3. Whether it was the elemental lords in the mirror or the tenants, none of them uttered a single word after hearing his quote. They just looked at each other with stunned expressions, seemingly unable to believe what their ears had just heard. Lord Shiva paused the memories and remained silent, knowing that this sort of news wasn't easy to accept in the slightest for anyone. As he expected, everyone went straight into the denial stage. This can't be real. They must have said so to mess with you. It can't be real. It can't. Thor spoke with a slight tremor in his voice, trying his very best to keep his agitation from showing out. His partners might have remained quiet, but all of them shared the same attitude as him. It was just impossible for them to accept that their purpose in life was for the sake of those beings' entertainment. They never wished for their purpose to be a noble one, but they would rather believe that they were born purposeless than this. Who could blame them? Earthlings used to live for less than 100 years, and yet most of them spend their lives contemplating the purpose of their lives. Most believe that religion is the final answer, and some believe that they were created out of coincidence. Even those people would not take it too kindly if they knew that they were mere clowns born to entertain higher powers. Primogenitors lived billions of years questioning their existence, since they were considered the first intelligent creatures born in the universe from already existing species. Anyone would assume that they were special and born to serve a noble purpose, even when the universe seemed to have given them absolutely no duties to carry on. So, to find out that their entire lives and struggles were for some being's entertainment was literally the worst possible outcome. This was our reaction too. Lord Shiva shook his head as he played his memories again, showing the elemental lord's reaction. Are you messing with us? Lord Loki's expression turned cold all of a sudden. Is this your way of retaliation for my pranks? Do you see me smiling? Lord Shiva replied calmly. The debut release of this chapter happened at N0V3L_B1N. Arg. This just can't be the truth. Those bastards must have said that to F***ck with you for annoying them continuously. Lord Quetzalcoatl uttered with a distressed tone. I thought so the same when I first heard it. I even cursed them off before retreating. But, the more I thought about it, the more it made the most sense to me. Lord Shiva smiled wryly as he explained, we already had a strong hunch that we are related heavily to those beings due to the 3 celestial divine languages being written on us. If we were born as primogenitors straight away, I wouldn't have spent even a second entertaining the thought that those bastards have created us, but, we weren't. Felix noticed that the elemental lords and even the tenants' expressions turned for the worst at the sound of that. He might not understand everything, but with the type of information he had, he was able to recognize that those beings were the ones bestowing those gifts upon the primogenitors. Hence the term create instead of birth was present during the quote. As our creators, I just couldn't find a logical way for them to lie to me. Lord Shiva closed his eyes shut as he said one last time, for we know deep down that we find it beneath us to lie to mortals. Silence engulfed the tent and the consciousness space yet again. This time, no one seemed to be in denial anymore, as Felix could feel the atmosphere turning more intense with each second passing. It was like a collection of volcanoes on the verge of eruption being suppressed. In the blink of an eye, Thor was the first to allow his burning rage burst out of him as he cursed thunderously, Mother ****. His drunken playful attitude was nowhere to be seen as his reddened face was twisted in absolute fury. They have been treating us like F***ing clowns. Even the chill carbuncle found it impossible to stifle his rage. He just couldn't imagine having every experience in his rich life being watched and judged for someone else's enjoyment. It was far worse than the Champions Games in the SG Alliance, as the primogenitors at least told their champions the entire truth and left them to decide whether to take part or not. But the primogenitors had no choice whatsoever. They were given gifts from nowhere and left to live their lives as they pleased without knowing that each decision made by them was observed. That's why we were given the freedom to do as we please without consequences, unlike the Unigens. We are not natural products. Fenrir said as he tightened his fists until his claws penetrated his palms. The universe sought a natural balance in its system, and it did everything in its power to keep it from breaking. The primogenitor's existence could be said to be the only thing that broke this perfect balance, as they were extraordinarily strong and had no leashes to keep them in check. Unigens were punished each time they abused their powers. Dragons were immensely strong, but their reproduction wasn't great. The hive race had both reproduction and strength, but their longevity was too short. Every single race in this universe, whether they belonged to the primogenitor's family tree or not, was subjected to the balancing of the universe. Only the primogenitors seemed to have godly powers that could literally bring ends to the universe and yet nothing to hold them back. This kind of unquestionable freedom was an obvious clue of their unnatural creation, as the universe would never give birth to such beings without proper breaks. I need a breather. Lady Sphinx stood up from her chair and walked away while massaging her closed-shut eyes. She neither screamed nor cursed like the others, but her slightly lowered head spoke volumes about how much damage this news had done to her. Lady Sphinx rarely felt depressed about her meaning of existence since her mind was already occupied with the universe's secrets. In her eyes, there was just too much to discover to bother moaning about why she was born like the others, but this didn't mean that he never cared about this. Now that she found out the truth, it wasn't far-fetched to say that it broke her heart. Masters. Felix could only watch his masters with a pained expression, having no idea what to say or do to comfort either of them. This was just way above his league, as nothing he said could make any difference. His masters had already lived their entire lives and some of them even killed themselves because of this damning question. Now that they finally had gotten it, it sure did more damage than relieving them and completing their lives. Lord Koaz waited until Lady Sphinx returned to the table and everyone to release some of their anger before asking them, "So, you still want to share this with the others?" Everyone turned to glare at him, but no one responded to his question. They finally realized that the elemental lords made the right decision. It wasn't because none of them were capable of handling it. They just felt that it would be much better to be ignorant than to figure out that they were living in a clown world and were the clowns in it. This was the reaction of dead primogenitors. One could only imagine what would become of the universe if all the primogenitors learned about this. As for finding out about it billions of years ago, it was actually much worse, as it would completely ruin their lives. I understand why you sought to erase the universe. When you realize that you are nothing but a pawn on a chessboard, you get presented with three choices: remain a pawn, ditch the chessboard, or Elder Kraken-eyed Lord Shiva as he uttered, flip the board and ruin the game for the players. Me? I know that I am seen as a menace by most of you, but even I didn't think about such an insane idea. Lord Shiva chuckled as he noticed everyone's startled looks. Whose idea was it? Keep watching. Lord Shiva unpaused his memories and speed up the rest of the elemental lord's reaction to the news. When it seemed like the atmosphere was cooled down, he slowed the memories and showed the elemental lords to be in the middle of a serious telepathic discussion. How can we continue living after this? Anything we do is for naught. What's the point of even living anymore? Lord Quetzalcoatl seemed to have lost his upbeat, lively attitude. As the life primogenitor, it was really discouraging to see him talking about offing himself. But it really seemed to everyone that their lives were doomed. If they decided to hang around, they would do so while knowing that all of their experiences were for someone else's enjoyment. Their pride made it almost impossible for them to accept such a reality. Even telling Lord Shiva about our reality is a move from them to spectate our reaction. Lord Osiris stated expressionlessly, "They don't care about what we do next as long as it is entertaining. How about we tell everyone about this and end our lives and descendants' lives at the same time? Let's see how fun it will be if the entire universe was turned into a deserted graveyard." Lord Loki suggested with no chill whatsoever. "That seems too extreme, but I love it." Lord Shiva smiled coldly. It was clear that the rest of the elemental lords seemed to be on the same page about this plan. Elder Kraken said that there were three choices, but in the eyes of the elemental lords, there was only one choice, and that was flipping the board. As for their death and massacring trillions of, they didn't give a sh*t, as they knew that all primogenitors would take a part in their plan and have no issues in killing their own descendants. In their eyes, they brought them to this universe and they had the authority to get them out of it. However, just as they seemed to start ironing out the details of this plan, Lord Zervan said with the same kind smile, "It's not enough, they will just send out the same gifts yet again to other species and restart the game from scratch." "You're right, sh*t. Sigh, I can see that happening. I think we should still go for it," Lord Shiva asserted. "It won't be perfect, but it will cause them to wait billions of years again before they reach this point." "You think they have issues with time?" Lord Zervan shook his head. "Even trillions of years means nothing to them." "Then, we do nothing. Lord Loki seemed irritated by this hopeless situation, more than 5 elemental lords allying against one problem and they still couldn't fix it. You guys aren't really flipping the board, you are just removing the pieces from it and they can always put them back on. With a wide warm kind smile, Lord Zervan proposed, the only way to truly destroy the board is if we destroy the entire universe as we know it. 1274 Truth in Lies, Lies in Truth? Who to believe? 4. Author disclaimer, my apologies for not releasing chapters yesterday, my best friend's brother has gotten himself into a horrible motorcycle incident and I had to be there for him. There will be a double release today and tomorrow to make up for yesterday, thank you for your understanding. P.S. Please drive safely. Lord Zervan. Felix exclaimed in shock after finding out that the respected and seemingly kind Lord Zervan was the one who sought the destruction of the universe. His reaction was shared with most tenants as no one saw this coming. Zervi, I don't believe it for a second that you have become this savage to propose such an insane idea. Lord Loki narrowed his eyes. Spill it, you must have seen something in the future, right? The elemental lords clearly couldn't buy it either as they knew that Lord Zervan rarely proposed anything as he was just like a boat in an ocean, going with the flow wherever it took him. Lord Zervan merely smiled at the judging eyes of his peers and remained quiet, making them understand that he wouldn't be sharing anything with them. They knew that he had a frightening future vision that enabled him to see through even millions of years ahead of time as long as he remained as a mere spectator. The moment he shared his information or tried to alter the future, his memories would be erased of everything that he had seen as a new future would be taking shape. Seeing that grilling Lord Zervan for information was as useless as always, Lord Loki could only click his tongue and drop the subject. Universal destruction, how can we even pull it off? Lord Osiris shook his head, it just seems impossible even if all primogenitors combined their strength. Lord Osiris understood that even Unigens would struggle with pulling this off as the universe's size was just too unfathomable. Since Lord Zervan suggested this, it only means there is a way to make it happen. Lord Shiva looked at Lord Zervan and asked, so? Before Lord Zervan could answer, Lord Shiva skipped the entire conversation while talking to the tenants, it's best to show you straight away what we talked about. A second later, the mirror was showing the same gathering of members with the addition of Lord Dune and the creation primogenitor. They were gathered in the vacuum of space in the middle of nowhere. The creation primogenitor seemed to be glowing with a white angelic light. Still, his features were distinguishable. He was a towering figure, standing over 10 meters tall, with broad shoulders and a muscular build. He wore a suit of golden armor that glimmered in the far distant light of stars, adorned with intricate patterns and symbols that spoke of his power and authority. A red cape hung from his shoulders, affixed in the vacuum of space. His face was stern and resolute, with a thick brown beard and piercing eyes that seemed to gaze into the soul of whoever he looked upon. L1 Terrari N0V3L hosted the first appearance of this chapter at N0vel.B1N. His hair was long and braided, falling in golden strands around his shoulders. He had 4 sets of green feathery wings on his back, which made him seem even more deity-like than the rest. Is everyone ready? Lord Shiva inquired. Let's begin. Lord Kaos said expressionlessly as he opened a massive void rift in front of them. As the creation primogenitor, he could create anything that existed in this universe, whether it was physical, energy-based, or spiritual. When Lord Dune noticed that Lord Shiva had closed his eyes shut and began absorbing somewhat of an invisible black aura from his descendants, he teleported everyone away but Lord Marduk and the descendants. Since everyone was watching from Lord Shiva's point of view, they had no idea where they went. We had to retreat to safety as Lord Shiva was going to cast his ultimate ability and no one is safe from it but his descendants and creation primogenitor. Lord Kaos clarified calmly. Why creation primogenitor is safe from it? Candace murmured to herself, not expecting that Lord Kaos would bother himself to answer it. Because he can create destruction immunity on himself. Seriously? Felix was left dazed at his answer. Each time he hear about the creation primogenitor, he got more convinced that he was really the closest to being considered a true god in this universe. The fact that he could create even immunities and mostly likely abilities of other elements made him truly an omnipotent being capable of doing everything and anything. Abruptly, Lord Shiva's body seemed to be shaking like it was about to explode. His skin cracks were turning brighter and brighter until his entire body disappeared under a halo of blinding light. Then, he uttered with a flat tone in his mind, "Totality collapse." The moment those two words echoed in his mind, the blinding light went off instantly, and what came after it was long invisible cracks seemingly spreading from Lord Shiva as the source. Those cracks were causing the vacuum of space to collapse at a noticeable speed as all of the invisible forces, energies, matters, and concepts were getting erased in the process. If even gravity, dark matter, space, and time weren't able to stop those cracks, there was no need to mention what would happen to planets, stars, meteors, and other cosmic entities. Totality collapse, one of the most frightening ultimate abilities a primogenitor could even create. Fenrir spoke with a solemn tone. Even though Felix didn't hear about its details, he already figured out the simplicity of this ability. Total destruction, the last and most powerful type of destruction element. Felix murmured. Felix possessed abilities with normal destruction, construction, and even concept destruction, but not a single ability was capable of wiping out literally everything. Unbeknownst to Felix and the tenants, the other elemental lords were having their own conversation. "How is it looking?" Lord Osiris asked Lord Zervan. Lord Loki and the others looked at Lord Zervan with serious expressions, knowing that his answer would decide their fate. "Sorry guys, it's still not enough." Lord Zervan shook his head with an apologetic look. **T, how much?" Lord Quetzalcoatl inquired. 35% give or take. That's really too low. Lord Dune frowned. Is there really no other future? Unfortunately no. Knowing that Lord Zervan had no reason to lie to them, the elemental lords could only sigh in disappointment at the notion that their plan was bound to fail. They knew that Lord Zervan's future sight was affected by him telling others about it, but in this case, there wasn't much to be affected by the future since there were only two endings. Universal destruction and everyone died in it, or partial destruction and they were still alive in it. "I guess we should pull the plug," Lord Quetzalcoatl stated. "It's not worth it or fair to bring destruction upon a portion of the universe, killing everyone in it, and leaving the others untouched." The elemental lords might not care about the lives of their subjects, but they weren't mindless slaughters. In their eyes, the destruction of the whole universe wasn't a fair fate for everyone, but it was just as no one would be getting a different result, even them. But, destroying merely a portion of the universe would neither bother those beings nor solve the primogenitor's issue. "Lord Shiva, you can stop, it won't be enough to finish everything." Lord Osiris used the death string connecting them to send the bad news. Lord Shiva went quiet for a moment before asking with an icy tone, "Not enough. How much?" 35%. This number made Lord Shiva's expression turn for the worst. I can't stop, I have invested everything and those F***ers watched me put my blood and sweat for hundreds of millions of years into this plan." Lord Shiva's tone got angrier and colder at the same time. "I can't stop." While the other elemental lords barely invested a thing into this plan, Lord Shiva spent hundreds of millions of years mastering this godly ultimate ability. In addition, he worked his ass off to create as many offspring as possible for the sake of creating an army of his descendants. He did all of this while knowing that he was being watched as a mere clown by those beings. Now, he was being told that he needed to stop? He could already imagine himself being turned into a laughingstock before those beings, who should have already anticipated this ending and still watched him make a fool of himself. "Lord Shiva, what are you doing? We told you to stop." Lord Osiris hardened his tone. "I told you, there is no way that's happening." Lord Shiva said coldly, "I am going through this even if it meant blowing off my soul to accelerate the process." 1275 Truth in lies, lies in truth? Who to believe? The end. Lord Marduk cut off his energy supply. Lord Osiris requested after updating him on the situation. Lord Marduk did as he was told, making Lord Shiva get even angrier. Even you. We can always get new ideas to deal with them. Lord Marduk said calmly, this isn't the solution. Isn't the solution? It's the only F***king solution. We can't even touch them if they didn't allow us. Lord Shiva yelled, so, are you in or not? Lord Marduk shook his head and pulled away from Lord Shiva. He neither tried to stop him nor help him, he just let him be. Bunch of cowards. I will do it by myself then. Without an ounce of hesitation, Lord Shiva began absorbing everything there was to be gained from his descendants to boost his ultimate ability. Before he was planning to just absorb bloodline force as his ultimate ability was too strong, it required more than just elemental energy to fuel it. However, the best thing about it was the fact that it just needed a strong jump start and the cracks would continue expanding across the entire universe on their own even if he wasn't alive. They would be getting their source of energy from everything destroyed in their path. This was the key to destroying the universe, as it would be impossible otherwise when there were millions of light years of distance between galaxies. Before the elemental lords could even try to talk some sense into him, Lord Shiva warned Lord Osiris and Lord Marduk, it's best that you guys stay as far as possible from me. Even your destruction immunity won't save you from what's coming. Lord Shiva made them realize that he was hell-bent on getting his way after noticing that his soul was getting more chaotic. He is really planning to blow his soul to feed his ability. Lord Quetzalcoatl exclaimed, I knew that trusting this lunatic with this was a bad idea. Let's leave. Lord Osiris said expressionlessly, he has made up his mind and there is nothing we can do to stop him. They knew that not a single ability used by them could affect Lord Shiva, as those cracks would eat away anything they throw at him. Since Lord Shiva was already on the countdown to blow out his soul, even Lord Marduk would be at risk due to soul implosion affecting not just the physical world but also the spiritual world. Just this time, please be wrong. With this last wishful thought appearing in Lord Shiva's mind, the mirror showed nothing but a black screen. Lord Shiva was neither fought nor killed by the elemental lords as it was narrated, his life ended at his own hands in possibly the most selfish and unhinged manner. While all of this seemed like a lucid crazy dream, Felix was certain that it was nothing but the truth, the final truth. The eternal great void was the evidence left behind to support it. Even an idiot would have connected the dots and realized that the mysterious existence of the great void could be explained only by this event. You really are something else. Here I thought you deserve the benefits of the doubt. Lord Shiva could be said to have made himself the villain again in the eyes of Felix and the rest of the tenants after his story ended. It was a wild ride that served nothing but to tell the real truth and not help Lord Shiva look good in the slightest. All of their judging eyes made him look back at them with the same cold look from the memories. I have no intentions of seeking forgiveness. If I was put in the same situation, I would still do the same even if there was merely 0.00001% of the entire universe collapsing. You are really a madman. Asna cursed without an ounce of fear. As one who harbored the most hatred for those beings, she would have supported Lord Shiva's decision if it actually harmed them. But, to be told that it was going to fail and still go for it even knowing that it would do nothing but harm mortals, she could never go this far. Call me crazy, a lunatic, a madman, unhinged, I have heard them all. Lord Shiva sneered, but at least I have the guts to attempt to rescue everyone from this clown world and offered my own life to make it happen. If those bastards stuck with the plan and even used soul implosions as well, we might have had a much bigger chance to cover at least 65% of the universe. Lord Shiva glared at Lord Koaz. The speed of totality collapse might slow down drastically after that, but there is hope that it won't run out of fuel until it cover at least 90% of the universe. These are mere baseless speculation and you know it. You want us to ignore a decided future for the sake of one last mad attempt that is definitely not going to work. Lord Kaus shot it down immediately. A future told by Lord Zervan, who we have no **ing clue what is on his mind. Lord Shiva scoffed, for all we know, all of this is the future that he desired and we are nothing but cogs in his machine. Maybe. Lord Koaz didn't jump to defend Lord Zervan instantly as he always had his own doubts too. It was just foolish to completely trust the words of someone capable of seeing so far into the future as it was just impossible to figure out his end game. But still, I trust that he is on our side. Not knowing his endgame was one thing and not trusting him to be on their side was another. So, even when Lord Zervan wasn't fully trustworthy by his peers, they knew that he would never be on the side of those beings. Enough of this finger-blaming already, you are making yourselves look bad. Lady Sphinx interjected with an emotionless tone, what's done is done. This chapter made its debut appearance via N0V3LB1N. Fortunately, you guys have chosen the least populated area to start the universal collapse, so not many casualties resulted in Lord Shiva going rogue. Thor mentioned to calm the atmosphere a little. Don't be mistaken, 20% more or less of the universe getting deleted had caused the death of hundreds of trillions of lives, whether intelligent or non-intelligent. But still, it would have been nowhere close if they went for it in a populated zone. I assume you decided to imprison what remained of Lord Shiva's descendants as scapegoats to calm our anger. Elder Kraken informed. My descendants as scapegoats. Lord Shiva didn't seem too pleased with this kind of information, but at the same time, he understood that the elemental lords had to punish his descendants to sell the story that he went mad with his descendants and this was all of their doing. If they didn't go this far, questions would be asked that none of them were ready to answer yet. I don't care if you will be forced to alter your story, I want my descendants freed right this instant. Lord Shiva demanded. Take it up with Lord Marduk. Not bothering to entertain him any longer, Lord Koaz took off from the meeting and returned to his slumber. He didn't even bother to request Lady Sphinx and the others to keep the information to themselves. In his eyes, there were already too many people knowing about this and he had no plans to waste his time monitoring each one to keep it from leaking out. After his departure, Felix was left staring at Lord Shiva with a complex look. His emotions were really shambled as he had no idea what to think anymore about the situation. He picked and awakened Lord Shiva for his elemental manipulation even though he knew that he was crazy enough to destroy the universe. But after finding out that the madman actually pulled it off and wiped out more than 20% of it, he felt like getting his elemental manipulation was the same as taking a bloody knife from a murderer. Felix also caused billions of lives to be lost indirectly to him, but this was vastly different than going the extra distance to destroy the universe even when he knew that it wasn't going to work. What are you looking at? Lord Shiva stared back at him expressionlessly, having doubts on whether it is worth sacrificing your morals for the sake of my elemental manipulation. Is this your hope to deal with those beings? Lord Shiva sneered as he teleported away from the table, what a bunch of soft amateurs.